Okay, hello everyone. We're live. So I thought I would do a live stream talking about the anthropic argument and the fine-tuning argument for God. Anyone who wants to, you're free to click the link, join, come have a conversation about the arguments. I think they're very interesting arguments, and yeah, happy to have anyone who wants to join come chat. So I guess I'll begin with a fine-tuning argument. With the fine tuning argument, the basic idea is that we noticed that my phone got unplugged. 1 second. Okay, we begin with the observation that the universe is finely tuned. What does this mean? Well, what it means is that the parameters of the universe are such that they fall in this extremely narrow range. They're such that if you tweak them very slightly, no life could arise. And so, given that they're in this fine narrow range that's required for life to arise, then I think theism has a nice explanation of that, because maybe God would make that range, then be in that range. At least theism predicts a life-permitting universe, so it has to be something in the range. And in contrast, naturalism makes the odds of it being in this very narrow life-permitting range, when there are a huge number of other values it could take on that are much more probable. And naturalism makes the odds of that very low. Okay, existential, you ask, what are my thoughts on the stacking course objection to fine-tuning? Imagine the universe, the laws of the universe spelled out made by God. That was the initial conditions. It was stuff arranged to say made by God. You wouldn't say, oh, maybe there's a stacking course explanation. You can just add it to naturalism. And the reason is because the probability of that conditional on naturalism is very low, while the probability of that conditional on theism is much higher. And so similarly, while you can add to the naturalistic theory that it explains fine-tuning just as like an extra stipulation, it'll lower the probability of the theory because you're adding an extra stipulation that's undermotivated and that is very improbable, conditional on the bare hypothesis. But yeah, anyone who wants to join, just click the link. I guess maybe I'll discuss the anthropic argument. So the idea of the anthropic argument, so anthropic says how you reason about your own existence. Okay, and there are different theories about how you reason about your own existence. So here's one theory. I'll first introduce an example of an anthropic puzzle. Okay, so imagine a coin gets flipped. Or imagine, 10 people with red shirts get created and one person with a blue shirt gets created. Imagine I get created. I'm in a dark room. I can't see the color of my shirt. What odds should I give to having a red shirt? Well, I would say 10/11, because there are 10 people with a red shirt and one person with a blue shirt, and I have no evidence for which of those people I am, right? So, for that reason, like a red shirt is, it's sort of more likely than a blue shirt. And so that's sort of this purview of anthropic reasoning. It's how you reason about, if you don't know which of certain people you are, it's how you reason about that. Okay, and so there are different theories of anthropics, right? Different theories that say different things about how you should do anthropic reasoning. A lot of them are going to have this core component. So I claim that the correct anthropic theory is something called the self-indication assumption. What the self-indication assumption says is that given that you exist, you get very strong evidence that there are a bunch of people that exist. Okay, so for example, suppose a coin gets flipped. If it comes up heads, one person gets created. If it comes up tails, 1 billion people get created. Suppose you get created, then your credence in tails should be 1 billion times your credence in heads, because it makes it 1 billion times as likely that you would get created. And so then the thought is, okay, if that's right, and I'm happy to argue about why this self-indication assumption is right if people want to hear it. I've also written like 10 million articles about it on my blog. You can show that any view that diverges from the self-indication assumption will have to have these very implausible results where it'll get the result that you can predict in advance that some improbable event will happen, because if it doesn't happen, a bunch of people will come to exist. And it also predicts a bunch of other crazy things. So the self-indication assumption is correct. So from the fact that you exist, you get evidence that there are more people. This means that you get infinitely strong evidence that the number of people there are is the most that there could be. And then the thought is theism is the best explanation of that. If there is a God, you would expect that the number of people there would be, God would create, would be the most that there could be. He has no reason to stop after 10 billion or even infinity if he can create more. He can create a bigger infinity worth of people. So then you get evidence that there is the most people that there could be, and then theism is the best explanation of that fact because it naturally predicts that fact. Well, that is, astronomically unlikely on naturalism. So yeah, that's the basic idea. Anyone want to join the live stream? No one seems to be joining. Maybe I'll just wrap it up in a few minutes if no one joins, because it takes two to tango. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can sort of say more things, right? So why accept the self-indication assumption? Why accept that the fact that you exist gives you reason to think there are more people? Well, so here, let's imagine a case. Let's imagine you don't know that you're the first person, but you in fact are the first person. Okay. And so you're considering two hypotheses. Hypothesis one is that the first person will have 1,000 kids. Imagine these are the only two hypotheses, and they're about equally initially likely. First hypothesis is the first person will have 10,000 kids. Imagine people only have 10,000 kids or none. They don't like they don't have any number in between. The hypothesis one is that the first person will have 10,000 kids, and hypothesis two is that the first person will just have no kids. Okay, so you come to exist. If you don't adopt the self-indication assumption, you should be equal between these theories. Self-indication assumption would say that upon finding out that you exist, you don't know your birth rank, you should think that probably the first person had 10,000 kids, because then it's likelier that you'd come to exist. Now suppose you discover you're not the first person. Well, if the first person has 10,000 kids, the odds are 1 in 10,001 that you wouldn't be the first person. Well, if the first person has no kids, the odds are 100% that you would be the first person. And so now you get this result where you can be almost certain that the first person won't have any kids based on the fact that now you can be very confident that you won't have any kids, even though just based on the fact that if you do have kids, then it's unlikely that you would be the first person. And so now you can have sex with impunity and be confident that you won't get pregnant simply because of the fact that you're the first person and that you didn't know your birth rank and then later discovered it. That's very weird. It seems weird to think that your credence in some event happening in the future should depend on what consequences it'll have in the future. It seems like the odds that you should give to your wife getting pregnant should not depend on whether her getting pregnant will result in more future people. So anyways, yeah, so that's the basic argument. I guess, yeah, maybe I'll wrap up around the 10-minute mark if no one joins, because, just talking to an empty camera is kind of boring. But yeah, if people are curious to read more about this, I have a bunch of articles about it on my blog, which you can find if you look at self-indication assumption. And Joe Carlsmith also has a very interesting and thought-provoking 4-part series where he argues for the self-indication assumption. So yeah, those are both good things to read. I think also if you want to just get a good background in anthropic reasoning, read the book Anthropic Bias by Bostrom. I mean, it's a sort of disappointing book in a certain way, which is that, at least if you adopt the self-indication assumption, that he ends up dismissing the self-indication assumption after one page without, I think, seriously considering its merits. Where, he's like, oh, it solves the doomsday paradox and various other puzzles. But then he's like, it's obviously implausible because it implies that you should think the universe is infinite. And I just don't find that weird. If the universe is infinite, it's considerably more likely that the infinite universe would have you. And so from the fact that the universe is infinite, your existence should give you a reason to think the universe is infinite. And furthermore, I think we can show that that any plausible view will say that the universe is infinite, that your existence gives you a reason to think the universe is infinite. So the idea that people seem really worried about in terms of thinking that the universe is infinite is that it's sort of presumptuous, where it's from this philosophical reasoning about your own existence, you can be very confident about the size of the universe. And it's you're using anthropic reasoning to be presumptuous about science, when it seems like you should need to use the scientific method in order to get confident results pertaining to science. Okay, Zeman, you ask, why do you think there's a limit to all possible souls? Oh, wait, actually, sorry. Before I answer that, I'll just keep explaining the point that I was making before. So the idea is that, but I think you can show that any view is going to imply some presumptuousness that's similar. For if people are curious, Google. You can look at my article on my blog, which is linked below, that says all theories of anthropics are presumptuous. If you reason as if you're sort of randomly selected from the actual people, then you get presumptuousness in terms of you get this result where you should be very confident that the past didn't have that many people, because if the past had a lot of people, then it's unlikely that you'd be so late. Okay, anyways, Zeman, why do I think there's a limit to all possible souls? Can't God just make copies of souls and give them different lives? Well, so I don't think there's a limit to, I think there's a limit to all possible souls because, right, so, I mean, first of all, it doesn't seem that weird to me to think there's, if a soul is just a particular person, there's nothing impossible about just running out of people. There are an infinite number of truths, but there is a limit to all truths. It's not you could, you couldn't list them all, but, there is a set it's not like you can just keep making new truths. In theory, all truths could be contained within the mind of God, maybe. And then the other point is that I think just on the anthropic grounds, you should think that every possible soul is creatable by God, because otherwise, if it weren't true that every possible soul was creatable by God, then it's very unlikely that I would come to exist, because it's unlikely that my soul would be one of the special few that God would happen to create. So I think these anthropic grounds give you reasoning to think that every possible soul is creatable. And then I think there are certain other plausible philosophical views, even if you ultimately reject the soul theory, which I don't, that are compatible with this. So, for example, Timothy Williams has a view called necessitism, where his idea is that every person exists in all possible worlds, but in some of the worlds, they don't have any physical existence, right? So imagine I'd never been born. I would still exist in this world, but I would only have modal properties. I would only have the property of possibly existing here, but I wouldn't have any actual properties. So if that's true, then God can just actualize all of those. So so I think those are some reasons. And I don't think the argument hugely depends on it. I'm not super confident in it. Maybe there's a limit to how many people there can be, but it's something that I lean towards, certainly. I think it's more likely that, there are more people. Okay, well, I guess I'll wait 2 more minutes. And if anyone wants to join, happy to chat. I know, there are a lot of keyboard warriors who like to write long comments about how dumb the anthropic argument is, how dumb the fine-tuning argument is on my YouTube channel. So, if any of those people are watching, I'd encourage you, if the arguments are so dumb, come debunk them. I think you'll find that it's more difficult than people suspect. Okay, let's see. What are other things to say? Follow my blog. I think many of you do, but I think my blog is much better than my YouTube channel. I put a lot more thought into my blog articles than into my YouTube videos. Wait, okay, Fritz asks. Okay, yeah, that's funny, Patrick. Okay, Fritz asks, I probably will. I don't know. It's sort of a pain to respond to a bunch of comments, because a million people leave comments, and it's much more fun to sort of have live discussions with people than to respond to every silly comment that people leave on comment. Okay, answers in atheism, and I remember you were one of the people who left a snarky comment. So I'd encourage you to join if my article's so wrong. Okay, it's highly unlikely that any one of us exists. So what? Well, suppose there's some event that's highly unlikely on one theory and highly likely on another theory. Then it favors the theory on which it's not highly unlikely. So, for example, suppose a person gets a bunch of royal flushes in poker. That's evidence that they're cheating, because them getting a bunch of royal flushes is very likely if they're not cheating. Or sorry, if they are cheating, but very unlikely if they're not cheating. And so as a result, it's very strong evidence for the theory that they're cheating. And so similarly, if your existence is very unlikely, if there are no, if there's no God, but it's very likely if there is God, because God would create every possible person, then it's very strong evidence for God. Fritz, I'm not sure if I quite understand what you're saying. Doesn't Lewis's argument in favor of best 2 possible worlds involve a commitment to 1, space is physically continuous, and 2 is Humean mosaic picture of metaphysics? Oh, yeah. I don't know if it relies on the second one. I think it might rely on the first one. But I don't know. I do find it pretty plausible that space is continuous. And that it's at least my arguments for why there's no set of all possible people, those don't rely on a commitment to any of that. I think you can also show you can also show that so even if you have that, it's still generic koala, if you go to the link below the StreamYard link, then click it, and then you can join. I don't know if it relies on the Humean mosaic picture. I mean, the idea is just if there are, and even if it's not, even if you reject that it's best 2, because you reject that space is continuous. As long as it's still Beth1, that's still enough to sort of get the craziness. Like it would be bad news for theism if the number of possible people was Aleph null, right? Because an infinite universe has Aleph null people. But both Beth1 and Beth2 are like way beyond there being any plausible naturalistic account of how you have that many people. Now, I think that there are more people than Beth2. And I think we can show that to a pretty high degree of confidence. Yeah, okay, so Zeman, you ask, if I knew every, let's see, let me respond in order of people. Okay, James Asperson, yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, join next time, I think I'll do these more often. Okay, it's you say variable likely doesn't prove a hypothesis. Well, it does provide strong evidence for a hypothesis if the probability of the variable is high on one theory but low on another theory. Like in the cheating case, if a person gets 100 royal flushes in a row, you should think that they're probably cheating because the probability of them getting a bunch of royal flushes in a row is very low if they're not cheating, but very high if they are cheating. Okay. Zeman, you ask, if I knew every fact about the universe in which I live, my name, constants of physics, etc., then would SIA support theism? Because out of all universes observed in theism, only one would be like what I observed. Yeah, right. So, okay. So sort of, it depends on exactly. So the idea of SIA is that if there's some class of people that you currently might be, like imagine I just get created in a dark room. And there's one theory that says that 100 people get created in dark rooms, and one theory that says that a million, or that one person gets created in a dark room. Because I could be any of the people in the dark room on either hypothesis, it'll end up favoring the theory on which more people get created in the dark room, because there are more people who I currently might be. And so, yeah, so for that reason, if you knew exactly which person you are, that you knew, oh, I'm just this person, then theism only gives you reason to think that there are theories on which that person exists, right? So if you're, the copy, if you're a copy, well, I don't know if you can assign numbers to the copies, but if you're, this specific version of Matthew, like in this universe, and you know exactly which one you are, not just in the sense that you know that you are yourself, but you know what the third party description is of you. So like what universe you are in relation to other things, then it would only give you reason to think that being exists, not the other beings. But if you, on SIA, if you don't know which of the ones you are, that's when you get an update in favor of more people. You get an update in favor of there being more people that you currently might be. Okay, James Apperson, you said a lot of this sounds like the puddle argument. You say souls is less meaningful than people or person. We're sentient clouds moving across the sky, even less static. Well, so I don't think. Okay. So you say that it's like, okay, well, let me address the soul thing first. The argument doesn't rely on souls. I adopt the soul theory if people are curious about why. I have an article on my blog called You're a Soul, where I explain why I think you're a soul. So if you want to read that, yeah, you can see why I think you're a soul. But I think it's meaningful. The soul is just what it is that determines your identity through time. Is it like the puddle analogy? Well, I don't think it's like the puddle analogy because, I mean, in the case of a puddle, so, I mean, like, it's true that there are cases where, you can sort of anthropomorphize, and I think that's the idea of the puddle analogy, that the puddle is anthropomorphizing too much. But just anytime, it can't be the case that anytime you, like, see something is ideal for you, then inferring something from that is is a fallacious form of the puddle analogy. And I mean, I guess, in the case of the puddle, like, I don't think you should think the universe is finely tuned for puddles or anything, because puddles aren't special and aren't valuable. And so there isn't a high probability that they're valuable. So there's no special reason why a perfect being would want to design things for puddles. Well, there is for people. But just if there is a theory that naturally predicts, a finely tuned universe, and then we observe a finely tuned universe, then that's evidence for the theory. Like, how is this supposed to be different from? So imagine, imagine there's a firing squad and they all shoot at you, 100 people, and they all miss. It seems like you should get evidence that if there's a firing squad with 100 people and they all shoot at you and you miss, it seems like you get evidence that 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 there's some conspiracy for the firing squad to miss. That maybe you have a friend in the firing squad, maybe they're all sympathetic to you, etc. I don't think that's like the puddle analogy. I guess I think that the puddle analogy, it's sort of like importantly underspecified and underreported in what is claimed. So I don't think it's convincing. I mean, and if the idea is just the puddle analogy is like in the case where the puddle comes to exist, they should think, oh, the universe was finely tuned for me. Well, I think that's perfectly good reasoning. I think upon if you're a conscious creature and the odds of your existing are very low, unless things were designed in part for you, and that's evidence that things were designed in part for you. Okay, you ask. Okay. Likelihood is not evidence. Likelihood is evidence. Okay, see, like, people just need to learn some like basic, probability theory and philosophy of science, where like, the definition of evidence is B is evidence for A if the odds of B given A are higher than the odds of B given not A, because then the presence of B raises the probability of A. And so if a finely tuned universe is made more likely, if the odds of there being a finely tuned universe is more likely if there is a God than if there's not a God, then a finely tuned universe favors God. White Crow, you ask, hi, I've lost episodes. Are you vaguely a theist, or more specifically say, yeah, I'm just sort of a generic theist at this point? Okay, if something has happened, it has a probability of 1. Yes, that's true, but you look at not the probability that it happened, but the probability that it happened if only you knew something, right? So the reason why you infer that the person's cheating if they get a bunch of royal flushes is because even though now you think that there's a probability 1 of them, well, maybe not quite that because you might be mistaken, but okay, of getting a bunch of royal flushes, if the odds of that happening are super low, conditional on them not cheating, well, they're very high, conditional on them cheating, and so it's very likely that they're cheating. Okay, you say I was begging the question. Okay, I don't know how I was allegedly begging the question. Maybe you can clarify. How can I be an objectivist theorist and a utilitarian at the same time? Well, utilitarianism says that you should maximize how well off people are in the aggregate. An objectivist theory says that the things is just a theory of what makes a person well off. So there's no inconsistency. You say humans are more special than puddles. Yeah, I think humans are more special than puddles. So more specifically, I think we have a nice theory of why, if we posit that there's a perfect being, then that naturally predicts that there would be certain conscious creatures. It doesn't predict that there would be puddles. And so for this reason, we have a simple theory that predicts a finely tuned universe, and we don't have that predicts a finely tuned universe and one that cares about us. And we don't have one that predicts a finely tuned universe for puddles. And so for that reason, we should think that that the universe is finely tuned for life and not for puddles. Yeah, comparative likelihood is evidence, right? Anytime we infer something, we infer from evidence, we're inferring that thing from the evidence because the evidence is likelier on the hypothesis than not on the hypothesis. It's certainly possible that all the historical evidence we have for certain claims was forged by a grand conspiracy, but we don't think that's true because it's sufficiently unlikely that we shouldn't think it can happen. Okay, theism has a very high prior probability under SIA, but once I know that I am me, Zeman, and what kind of world and life I've lived, then wouldn't the postulator of theism be similar, the same as naturalism? No, because the idea is that you're a Zeman, but you don't know which of the Zemans you are, right? So, if there's one theory that says there are a million Zemans and one theory that says that there are 5 Zemans, the million Zemans theory wins because there are more people that you might be. So for that reason, okay, what makes us special in a math equation or in a sea of physics or to the universe? We're special to ourselves and maybe someone else, but so is a monkey at a zoo. Well, the idea is that we're special in the sense that there's this, if there's a being that cares about value, they would care about us because we're conscious, and conscious things are the only things that are of value. And so for that reason, and maybe you reject this, maybe you think, you're kind of a moral anti-realist. You don't think that there are things of value. If you think if there are things of value, then they're not objective moral facts. And so, yeah, for that reason, but even if you think there's like a 10% chance that, there are objective moral facts and that we're of value, well, then, a theory that predicts that there's a being of perfect goodness predicts that there would be a bunch of those creatures made that are of value. Okay, Mike, did you send... okay, if you get a royal flush twice, it proves that you are cheating. I don't know if that's a question. I don't know if it would prove that you're cheating if you get a royal flush twice. I mean, I guess it would be. Yeah, I mean, I think if you get a royal flush twice, you're probably cheating, right? Because the odds of that are 1 in many billions. But yeah. So yeah. Answers in atheism. You say so many holes. Well, anytime we infer something, it's because there's a hole in our knowledge, and we have a nice theory that fills the hole, and that makes otherwise mysterious things make sense. That we think the probability of them naturally arising is low if the theory is not true, and high if the theory is true. So we infer the theory. Do I have any thoughts on Aquinas's de ente argument? No, I don't. It's sort of one of those arguments where, like, I don't really know what to think about it. Maybe there's something to it, but it seems to require buying into a lot of weird metaphysics. Okay, the fine-tuning argument is broken because it operates on the unsupportable assumption that the universe could be different. If it can't be, all your waffling about probability is nonsense. Okay, no, that isn't true. So imagine a person gets a royal flush in poker, and then they get another, and another, and another, and another, and they get 10 royal flushes in a row, and you say, I think you're cheating. They say, no, I'm a necessitarian. So I don't think, or I'm a determinist. I don't think what happens could be different from what actually happens. That wouldn't. And by the way, so many people are commenting. Again, please join the, join the live call so we can have an interesting discussion. Because just responding to random comments is much less interesting. So they say, I get 10 royal flushes in a row, and they say, no, I think it's necessary that I get 10 royal flushes in a row because what happens is necessary. Something deterministic physical laws. That wouldn't be a good theory because it pushes the level of fine-tuning back a level to it's very unlikely that it would be necessary that they get that rather than something else. And so similarly, you don't solve fine-tuning by saying it's necessary or that the laws of physics couldn't be different, because then the question is, it's very unlikely that the thing that they would necessarily be is what they happen to be, right? It's like, or here's another example. Imagine that the initial conditions of the universe spell that made by God. In that case, that would be good evidence for God, even though, in a case like that, they wouldn't be evidence for God. Even though, in that case, you can say, oh, maybe they're necessary, but that's not a good theory. David Woodridge, some theories is more likely under theism than under atheism. Yes, I think that's a viable argument. I think, conscious creature is evidence for theism. Like theism predicts with higher probability a conscious creature. By perfect goodness, do I mean something that's perfectly in line with what you value? Not can you tell us what you mean? Yeah, so it's not in line with what I value. It's in line with the stuff that's valuable, the stuff that's objectively worth pursuing. Now, I don't know, Generic Koala, you're confused about how to join. If you're confused about how to join, click the StreamYard link and then go there. You should be able to join. So what I mean is something that's in accordance with the objective moral values. Now, maybe you think, oh, there aren't any values. Maybe you think it's unintelligible, but you should just think there's at least some chance that, there are such values and they're intelligible, maybe 10%, but then that's sort of all you need for theism to not have a terrible prior, because it's just, you take this fundamental thing and instantiate it with that limit. Why can't Beth 2 people exist in an infinite universe? Okay, so I was going. I talked a bit about this. Vikram was a person who called into the show before, and he was pressing me on this a bit. And he later he and I chatted about it, and we didn't come to an agreement. Hey, generic koala. I don't think I can hear you. Say something.
Oh, can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you now. Hey.
Okay, great. How's it going?
I guess, sorry, I'll just explain why Beth 2 people can't exist in an infinite universe. So the idea is, imagine you had Beth 2 people in an infinite universe. So if you have people that are, so if the universe is infinite, but it's like spatially connected, then the problem is that for any 2 people, you can write a sentence describing their relation, right? So imagine I want to describe you. Let's imagine you and I are 1,000 miles away. I say, there's a person, generic koala, 1,000 miles away from me. For every person everywhere else in the universe, you can write a single sentence to describe their relationship to you. Now, it turns out there are only aleph null possible sentences. And so for that reason, there can only be aleph null possible people rather than Beth 2.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll take your word that you're right on that. I don't really know why there'd be only that many sentences. Because I think I heard you say once, I don't know anything about like cardinal numbers besides like reading the Wikipedia, but I think you said once that like there's at Beth 2 number of ideas or Beth 2 thoughts or something like that. But couldn't you have a sentence expressing any given thought?
No, so what I said was that there are best two truths, but many truths are impossible to express. And one way we know that many proofs are impossible to express is that we know that the number of possible truths is more than the number of sentences. And so, like, think about the sentence, you know, there is a number called, and then you write down an infinite non-repeating decimal, and then you say, and, you know, there is another number called, and then you write down another non-repeating decimal. How would you know, that's not a sentence you could express, because you would have to, first of all, you'd have to express an infinitely long thought, which you can do. And then after that, you'd have to express that infinite thought, and then you'd have to express another thought after expressing an infinite thought, which you certainly can't do. So for that reason, and
So is it,
you know,
is it
it's
like, is it like a concern about time? Like there wouldn't be enough time to finish
no,
saying this number?
it's not about time. It's just you can't write down something, an infinitely long thought, and then write down something afterwards. Like you can't have a sentence.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. So for that reason, yeah, best two people couldn't exist in an. Now, you know, you could just say there's a multiverse with best two people. But the problem
Well, I don't know, but is that really a property of sentences? Like, couldn't you just have a sentence, but it's just it has a property such that like nobody could ever write it down or nobody could ever finish it in terms of using it?
Yeah, right. So so we're not talking about the number of sentences. We're talking about the number of truths. Right. So the
Yeah.
number of So the number of expressible sentences is aleph null, and the number of truths is more than that. But the idea is that, excuse me, there's a one-to-one pairing between expressible sentences and agents in a physically connected universe. At least agents.
Well,
At least
couldn't there
aren't
be someone
arbitrarily
infinitely
small, but
far
fewer
away from
than
you?
that.
And so there would always be someone infinitely far away from you, such that you would write a sentence that it's some number that never gets completed.
Well, sorry. So the idea is that there are people that are infinitely far away from you.
Yeah, right. Wouldn't there be if it's an infinite universe?
Well, not necessarily. Like, and there are an infinite number of numbers on the number line. That was a hard sentence to say. A lot of numbers.
But right, but you can always say what they are.
Right. So that wouldn't necessarily be the case, right? So the idea is that maybe there are the people that are infinitely apart. But I mean, the problem there is if you say people are infinitely far apart, it's unclear in what sense the people that are infinitely far apart are spatially connected. Like you know what we mean when we say things. So when we're talking about two things being the same universe, yeah, when we talk about the things being spatially connected in the universe, what we mean is sort of like, you know, you could go from one to one. That's what it sort of means to be in the same universe. But if they're infinitely far apart, then they're not spatially connected. So they're not the same universe.
That's a good point. Yeah, I have to think more about that.
Okay. White Crow asks, who is Beth? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I should have explained this. So some infinites are bigger than others. The smallest infinite is Beth 0, and Beth 1's bigger than that, and then Beth 2 is bigger than that. The origin of the term is that their second Hebrew letter in the alphabet is Bet, but for some reason it's sometimes pronounced as Beth, and it got mangled as Beth. So they call it Beth 1 and Beth 2 and Beth 0 and so on. Okay, isn't evolution the one tuning the universe with natural? Oh wait, sorry, and generic quality. Do you have any objection there?
Well, I was thinking, so like, if you have, do you have a view about how much space a possible person could take up? Because if you have Hume's, or not Hume's view, but David Lewis's Humean view, where it's like you can keep breaking it down infinitely small, could you have an infinite number of people in a finite space if you just keep subdividing it? Like how many would it be Beth 1?
Yeah,
points?
Yeah, so you could. Okay, so you could have like, imagine you had one spirit on this 1 foot, and then one spirit on the 6 inches, and then one spirit on the 3 inches,
right?
And
Yeah,
1.5 inches. So that would only be aleph null spirit. Now what you could do is you could have each spirit haunt 1 point, and then now one problem there is you only get Beth 1. So now you could say that there are Beth 1 universes. But remember, the way you say there are Beth 1 universes is you think that the way you say there are Beth 1 rather than Beth 2 possible people is you say that there aren't possible points. Like you can't have you can't have space be infinitely divisible. But if you say that, that is flatly contradictory with saying that you can have agents occupying zero space. So any way you do it, the number of possible agents will be at least the power set of the number of agents you get just in a big universe.
Yeah. And the reason why we're supposed to think there's best two possible people is because they can all be thinking of one truth, and there's infinitely many truths.
No. That's a different argument. No, the reason why we should think that there are Beth 2 truths is the idea. So the power set of Beth 1 is Beth 2. So there are at least Beth 1 agents, right? Because you could make a copy of me for each, for continuum many heights, like the number of differences in height between me and a guy an inch below me, the number of heights you could break that down into is Beth 1, right? And then you take the number of permutations of the points, and then you get Beth 2. Now I think it's more than that, right? So because I think there's a one-to-one correspondence between possible minds and possible truths, and so it has to be more. And then I also think that if you adopt the self-indication assumption of the kind I adopt, then you'll think that from the fact that you exist, you get evidence that the number of possible people is greater, right? And this seems sort of an intuitive, like if you adopt the self-indication assumption.
Oh, that seems strange though. Would it?
Well, so like I have a kind of long article giving a bunch of very complicated arguments for it. If people are curious to read it, called like for an unrestricted self-indication assumption. I guess the simplest argument is that, so imagine that we have a case where we see that 10 people exist. Okay, self-indication assumption says that's a very you shouldn't think that there are only 10 people. You should think the universe has more people. It seems very strange to say, well, if you just accept necessitarianism, then you get every possible person.
No, you're right about that.
Yeah,
because people try to use the necessary thing for a lot of things, and I think it basically never works. Like Oppie,
I agree.
The first time I ever encountered that was reading Oppie, when he said like, well, I just think these physical laws are necessary, and so fine-tuning doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I thought that was a silly objection. I guess generic qual. I assume you're an atheist. Are you like?
I'm not. I'm a very bizarre, strange kind of theist, but
okay,
one that has to believe in infinite space that is all physically connected. Or I don't know. I don't know if it has to all be physically connected, but I sort of think that.
Yeah, I think there's infinite space too, but I don't think it's also physically connected.
Yeah, I have strange views about like space because I'm sort of an idealist, but I think if you have everything as like phenomenal objects, then the way like different souls will interact is that they'll have some object that appears in both their minds, and you'll have some god over top of that like combines them. But you can have many gods going back over and over. So it's sort of like Berkeley, but you could keep having a sort of Berkeleyan world within another Berkeleyan world going back forever. I don't know how many people that would get you to, though.
I mean, I think you could be an idealist and think there are Beth 2 or unsettling many people. It might even be easier for an idealist because, like, if you're a single universe physicalist, then you have to think that that there are unsettling many people. Well, I guess if you're a single world idealist, then you have the same problem where it's like whatever is making the things the same. Yeah, so I think you'd have to have where like for it to be the same universe in some sense, there has to be a connectivity between the kinds of consciousness there are, and then there are only going to be aleph null of them. But yeah, okay. Other people, okay, lots of people are leaving these very confused comments in the live chat, but there are sort of too many to address, and so I would really encourage these people to join the chat because or to join the live stream, which the link is below, because unfortunately, generic koala seems to know what he's talking about and seems philosophically informed and is a theist. So no, that's
that's not good. We need atheists. We need to get you don't need to have your camera on. You can turn off the camera. You don't need to dox yourself. We just need people.
Yeah. We just want people to argue about the argument. Okay. Comparing a necessary hand to getting dealt Pogranz is a flawed comparison because there would be no dealing. It would simply be as is. What? Can anyone else parse this utterance?
A
is the
necessary
idea that
universe
there's some
is all
process
poker
that
hand.
determines the poker hand, so calling it necessary doesn't make sense. Okay,
I think
well,
he's trying to say, I think, like, we have background knowledge about how poker works, which implies that, like, there's certain probabilities of the cards you get.
um, okay, well, so
Maybe I'm
then,
being charitable, I don't know, but that's how I'd read it.
yeah, well, so I mean, that'll get into all the traditional priors with getting your background knowledge from some sample where it's like okay, we have a general knowledge about what the space, what, like, if you keep rerunning poker hands in general, but we have no special knowledge about if you keep running this particular poker hand. Maybe there's something special about it. And I mean, more importantly, just think to a case where the laws of nature spell out made by God. Um, if they spelled out made by God, that would clearly be good evidence for theism, even though, you can always say, well, we don't have any evidence of what the initial conditions are. There's only one sample, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, Prophet Rob should type a response to that, or better yet, should join the StreamYard.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Prophet Rob would often say things when I was on Twitter. I am now on Twitter again, by the way, if you are on Twitter at Bentham's Bulldog. But
Bentham's Bulldog, okay,
we
I'll
would
follow
sometimes
you.
get into these annoying beefs. But yeah. So anyone free to join. Okay, evolutionary capitalism, utilitarianism. I like two of those things. Well, I like all of them. I'm in. Evolution obviously happened and stuff. But I guess I'm worried about. I think.
But nobody really likes evolution, even if it happened. It's not a very happy process.
Yeah. But it's sort of like cool, it's like interesting. But okay, you ask, is evolution the one fine-tuning the universe with natural selection? No, because evolution is what evolution is what brought the creatures that are on Earth, what made it so that they were interesting and complex. But it's not what fine-tuned the universe, right? Because the fine-tuning of the universe predates it. Now, maybe the idea is that there's some quasi-evolutionary process, so maybe like black holes give rise to universe. But then that just takes it up a level to, why do you have some initial set of starting conditions that are such as to give rise to a bunch of universes and give rise to an evolutionary process? Because that's very improbable. Like, why do you have black holes that give rise to universes? And also, you have the law that says black holes give rise to universes and other, and then also universes. Okay, Simon Forsyth, the probability of any two results of a shuffled deck is equal. True. Thanks for the up. I mean, maybe that the idea was that was supposed to refute what I said in some way, right? It's true, but if there's a theory that predicts the result of a shuffled hand,
yeah. So if you take it out and all the cards are in order, then you wouldn't just think, well, this is just as likely as any other one. You'd think, well, we just took this out of the box, and so they've sorted it this way from the store.
Right. Or if Prophet Rob's here. Oh, very exciting. Hello.
Oh, that is exciting.
Hello, is this audible?
Yeah. Okay, so Prophet Rob, suppose that the initial conditions of the universe spelled out made by God. Would that be good evidence for the existence of God?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So suppose that the initial conditions of the universe were, like particles and stuff arranged to spell out made by God, or in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Would that be good evidence for God?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so you were objecting that because we don't have a sample of other things, that you can say, oh, it's necessary. Why couldn't you say it in that case?
No, you could. I'm just saying we can't even rule that out even a little bit.
Okay, so would that be good evidence for the existence of God in that case?
I guess.
Okay, but you think fine-tuning is not good evidence for the existence of God?
Yeah, because there's no way to guarantee that there was tunability.
Okay, so what's the relevant difference supposed to be between the two cases?
Where one's good evidence and the other's not. They're approximately equivalent.
Okay, so if one's good evidence and the other's not, then there should be some difference that explains why one's good evidence and the other's not. So what is that difference?
I don't know what you mean by the other's not.
So there are two cases, okay, that we're talking about. The first case is the fine-tuning for the initial conditions of the universe, where the initial conditions are such that if you can think of the parameters they might take on, only a very small share of them produce anything interesting. The second scenario that we're talking about is a scenario where the initial conditions of the universe were, stuff arranged to spell out made by God, or in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You say in the first case, in the fine-tuning case, that's not good evidence. In the second case, where the initial conditions were to spell out made by God, that would be good evidence. So I'm asking, what is the difference that makes the first one not good evidence and the second one good evidence?
Oh, because the first one doesn't explicitly say that it's made by God.
Okay, and why is that supposed to matter?
Because it could be this universe we see could be evidence for either one. It could be evidence for a God or not for a God. It's kind of
Well, that's not actually how
indeterminable.
putting that aside. So you're suggesting, okay, so you're suggesting that there's just something special about it saying made by God. Okay, what if it spelled out in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? Why would that, would that be good evidence for God?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so why would that be good evidence for God, but the fine tuning not be?
Because we don't know that it's tuned.
Okay, so and why couldn't you say in that case? So when you say we don't know that it's tuned, what you're saying is that, look, we don't know that there are these other possibilities of it taking on different values. So why wouldn't you say, look, in this other case where it spells out explicitly in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, we don't know that it could take on these other values.
Yeah, that's why I said it might be good evidence, because like it could just be that it is that way. I don't know.
Okay, but so do you think that discovering that would that make the existence of God considerably more likely?
I don't know if that's even analyzable.
Well,
Like
I think it's analyzable. Like, and this is so, it's so crazy. The people they claim to care about a good deal about evidence and science, and if they found out that the beginning of the world started with conditions that spelled out the same thing as Genesis 1:1, they don't find that would be persuasive evidence. I mean, it's just a ridiculous not caring about evidence.
I want to go back to the poker analogy though.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about the poker analogy.
Okay, so when you start out with the analogy, you're automatically assuming that there's hands being dealt and that it's possible to not get a royal flush.
I'm not assuming that, right? So, you could have a view on which getting a royal flush is necessary, right? Maybe you're a necessitarian, so you think whatever happens is necessary metaphysically. Or maybe you're at least a determinist, where you say that what happens, you're saying that what happens is at least physically necessary, right? So, if you think those, then you think it is necessary that they got the hands. But nonetheless, that wouldn't seem to be a good explanation, because then the question is, why is it necessarily that they get that rather than some other set of hands?
Oh, it just is what it is if it is.
It is what it is if it is. That
Yeah,
is not a helpful sentence.
Okay, so imagine there being God. Obviously, we could conceive of God being different, but if there is a God, I don't think it would be the sort of thing that could be different. So it's not that we got dealt a bunch of royal flushes that there turned out to be a loving God. It just is that way.
Okay, well, so in the royal flush case, what you were saying was that fine-tuning isn't good evidence for God, because even though there are all these other values that you could imagine it taking on, there's no evidence that those things are actually possible. So I was saying, so imagine you have another case where you have a necessitarian who says whatever happens is necessary, that whatever, that the things that happen, that don't happen are not possible. You wouldn't think that explains an otherwise improbable event like getting royal flushes. And so I claim that those are analogous in that in both cases, the theory says that the things are necessary. But that's not a good explanation, because saying X is necessary doesn't explain why X happened. So why is, and so I don't think the cases are different. And you're sort of waffling and giving inconsistent answers about why the cases are different.
I don't really think so, because if there's a necessary God, it's not that it could have been different. You didn't get dealt cards.
Well, hold on. We're not talking about a God. We're talking about
Why
the
not?
naturalistic hypothesis.
To me, they're equivalent.
You think the God hypothesis and the naturalist hypothesis are equivalent? When you say equivalent, what do you mean by that?
I mean, they would both be necessary in their own right.
Okay, so they're both necessary. Okay, sure. So you say, that the naturalistic hypothesis is necessary. So then the person has a theory. You say, generic quality, you're making a bunch of noise. Are you on a motorcycle or something? Or are you doing kick flips? Okay. Anyways, so in both cases, what happens is you say this thing that happens that takes on this very specific value out of a wide range of possible values that it could take on. You say it's necessary. And in both cases, we think, in the first case where you say the royal flush, to get the royal flush, we think that's not a good explanation. So why is it supposed to be a good explanation in the second case where you say, look, the reason why it took on this improbable value. Okay, I'm removing.
Okay, so the thing is that you're already assuming that it's improbable when you're saying it took on an improbable value. Under necessitarianism, it's not improbable. You're just imagining things that can't happen.
Well, no. So what I said, so once again, go back to the case where the necessitarian says it's necessary that I get the royal flush. Do you think that's a good explanation of why they get the royal flush?
Yeah.
Okay. So you think that, are you a necessitarian? Do you think that
Yes.
whatever happens is actually necessary?
Yes, regardless of whether a God was necessary or just simply the universe was necessary, it seems to me that whatever the fundamental nature of the world we live in is couldn't have been different, because there would be nothing outside of it to make it such that it could be different.
Okay, great. So then if a person gets 10 royal flushes in a row in poker, you don't say, look, that was very improbable because, you have no evidence it could have been different.
Yeah. Like,
okay, so
if I roll a dice.
Right. So then why do you, so if a person got 10 royal flushes in a row in poker, would you infer that they're probably cheating?
No.
What if they got 100 royal flushes in a row in poker?
If it happened, then it had to happen. And like you keep going back to these probability arguments, but that's not how the universe works.
If you're like so versed to probabilistic reasoning, where you think even after getting 100 royal flushes in a row, what if the person's a known cheater? Like what if they're known to cheat in a significant share of their poker hands? In a case like that, you think they get 100 royal flushes in a row, they're a known cheater. You think you still shouldn't think that they're cheating because whatever happens had to happen. Okay, then you're just going to throw out any basis of doing any scientific reasoning, because any scientific reasoning will proceed based on probabilistic evidence about the odds of various things happening. I mean, do you believe in science?
Yeah, but I don't think it operates by real probabilities.
Well, I don't know. So when you say real probabilities, whatever probabilities science operates by. Okay, now after that guy, called in and was, showing off his feet in weird ways, now I'm worried about letting in other people. I guess.
He says he won't do that. I believe him. He seems like a good guy.
Yeah, I guess for people who are joining, can you turn on your camera or something so I can see that you're not sketchy, or okay. Hey, random person. Evo Capitalist doesn't have a camera, right? Okay, so well, sorry. I guess I don't want to risk it for people who don't have a camera. Sorry. Yeah, so I guess in all these cases, you infer, there are lots of cases in science where you infer that something happens because the event happening is likely on one theory and unlikely on another theory. So, for example, one of the reasons why the theory of continental drift was believed was that the fauna, the animals and plants and stuff in Africa and South America were very, very similar, suspiciously similar, and especially similar if we look back in the fossil record to when it was theorized that they split. And so that's much more strongly predicted if they were once connected. And also the fact that they sort of fit together, like puzzle pieces, right? And so if you throw out the doing reasoning where we don't ever we infer that something is unlikely on one theory and likely on another theory, then we're just going to end up being kind of unable to we're just going to be unable to do nearly all of scientific reasoning.
I mean, we could still exclude things based on what is the case, but we can't really assign likelihoods to these sort of things in the same sense that real probability would work.
So do you think we can assign likelihoods to anything?
I think we can abstract out likelihoods, like all things being equal, but I don't think all things are ever equal.
Okay, so suppose that we, suppose that we observe a person gets a bunch of royal flushes.
That's why I
Uh,
hate this stupid analogy.
Well, so do you
'Cause
think they're probably? So you don't think they're probably cheating in that case? You don't think that's reasonable to infer if they get 10 royal flushes in a row? The odds of that, royal flushes, it comes up in about 1 in 4.5 million hands.
I just think royal flush is inapplicable to what's actually happening with regard to the way the universe exists. Like you keep building back in an unlikeliness, but there wouldn't be an
Sorry, and
unlikeliness.
why is it unlikely in the royal flush case? They say it's necessary that I get a royal flush, so it's not unlikely.
Because you're trying to insert an intuition that it could have been otherwise. If somebody just
Sorry, you
comes
cut out for a
up
second.
to a table,
I couldn't hear what you just said.
because you're inserting into the example that it could actually be otherwise. Like it's sort
Sorry,
of like a false
how am I
notion of
doing that?
probability.
Like I'm just
Because
saying,
you're
imagine a guy gets 10 royal flushes in a row. Do you think they're probably cheating? I'm not saying anything about whether they could get something else. I'm not, committing to a view on necessitarianism. My claim is just if you say that saying that a thing is necessary is a good explanation of that, and it doesn't require anything else.
I certainly couldn't rule out that they weren't cheating.
Well, do you think if you had to, like, do you think that they're probably cheating?
It's like it's hard to say probably. I think they might be, but I can't really tell.
Okay, well, so I mean, this is like a a crazy view that if a person gets 10 royal flushes in a row, you shouldn't think they're probably cheating.
It's evidence to their cheating.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, and so then the idea is that fine-tuning would. I mean, the idea is just if there are a wide range of values that something could take on, and there's nothing special about any of them, then, and when I say could take on, I'm not talking about that actually in a modal sense. Like maybe you think it's metaphysically impossible, you're a necessitarian or something. But if there's a wide range of values that something could take on.
Hey, can you insert conceivably in there? Because I think that would make it
Yeah,
clear.
sure. If there's a wide range of conceivable values for something to take on, then
Yeah.
then if it takes on a value that's in a very narrow range, where there's one theory that predicts it taking on that value, then it would be good evidence for the theory that makes it likely if there are a wide range of conceivable options. That's why it would be true in the poker case. That's why. Or here's another case I like. So imagine there's some fundamental law of physics that determines the output of a particle accelerator, and we have no idea what number it would output. And let's say that it outputs the number 685,577. Imagine that just happens to be that guy's favorite number. Like he has a tattoo with that number. He has, a million things with that number. Imagine no one else will be able to repeat the experiment. We're just trying to figure out if he's bullshitting. Well, surely that would be some evidence, and I think very strong evidence that he's bullshitting, because the odds of it taking on that number are way higher if it was finely tuned than, or if he was rigging it, than if it wasn't. So in that case, it would be evidence, even though there aren't on the other hypothesis, there aren't other values that it could take on because it's determined by the laws of physics, right? So in that case, I think that would be evidence that he's cheating. Or, the best case, I think, for this is you imagine the starting conditions of the universe spelled out, made by God or something. That would be very strong evidence for the existence of God, even though, even though the odds of them spelling out made by God are like very low if there is no God and high if there is a God.
But in that case, if there is no God and it was like that, the odds that you came up with just now would be irrelevant. It would be inevitable.
Well, no, it would. So it would be inevitable again. So
it would appear to us that it wasn't inevitable because we're just ignorant.
So it would be inevitable in the like metaphysical or nomological sense, right? It couldn't be otherwise, but it wouldn't in the but the kind of probability relevant to epistemic reasoning is probably reasoning. Like, yeah, I mean, so I guess I'm still struggling to see what's supposed to be the difference between if it's spelled out made by God and the initial conditions being finely tuned. Or sorry, not spelled out made by God. You said, oh, there's something special about it saying made by God. So if it's spelled out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and then went on for several more passages. How is that different from fine tuning in terms of its probabilistic significance?
Because it remains to be determined whether or not the universe was tuned, like, and we don't know how finely it was tuned. If it could only take one value, then it's not tuned or fine-tuned. I'm not trying to say that like this is
Yeah,
the
well,
only
so
conceivable case. I'm just saying we
but
can't rule
in
this
the
out.
other case, well, hold on. In the case where it's spelled out in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In that case, you could make the same pitch. You could say, we don't know if it's tuned. We don't know. We don't have any value. We don't know if it could have taken on other constants. But nonetheless, that would be very improbable that it would take on that specific value if it's not fixed by God. So that would be good evidence for the existence.
But it
of
wouldn't
God.
be improbable on its own terms. It would be, I don't know why it's like that.
Do you think that if that happened, that would be good evidence for the existence of God?
I'd consider it more, but I don't think us existing is analogous to that.
Okay, and why is it not analogous?
Because we could just exist.
And the value could just be, the initial conditions could just be, spelling out in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with
Yeah, they
God, and the
could.
Word was. Right, so that's not a difference. If you can't just say the difference is something that applies to both of the things, that's not a difference. That's a similarity.
Well, I'm just trying to explain that we can't rule it out.
Okay, well, I'm asking about evidence, okay, because that's what I'm interested in. So you agree that if that happened, that would spelled out in the beginning was the Word, etc., that would be good evidence for God. You don't think fine tuning is good evidence for God. I'm trying to get you to explain the difference.
Wait, real quick. Would you agree that there's the possibility of multiple universes, theoretically a really, really large number, closing to infinity?
Yeah, so I think it's possible, certainly, and I think there is a multiverse.
Yeah, so if there are multiple universes, then it's like playing the poker hand, a really large number of times, and then you're bound to get a few royal flushes, and then our universe just happens to be one of those royal flushes, in which the physical constants just happen to be the correct, value for life to exist.
Yeah, so I think the multiverse is a good explanation of fine tuning, but I think it has some problems. If people are curious, I have an article called "The Fine Tuning Argument Simply Works," which you can find on my blog linked below. I think there are basically 6 problems with inferring a multiverse from I think there are like six problems. Let's see if I can remember them all. So the first one is, and I've actually grown. I've grown less confident in 2 of them, but I think there are at least things that may be problems. So okay. Yeah, so the first one is, and this is, I think, the most fundamental thing. So beyond the fine-tuning about physics, there's just this more basic conceptual point that the odds of the odds of the parameters of the universe falling in this narrow range, or the odds of there being a structure of laws that produces anything interesting is very low. Like for every law that produces something interesting, you can imagine an infinite number of laws that produce nothing interesting. Like just all the simplest laws don't produce anything interesting. The laws that do, the relative density of them is very low. Okay, so for that reason, only a very small share of laws produce anything interesting.
Okay. Well, I mean,
So now,
that's sort of the point, right? Like if you have an infinite number of universes, you're
Well,
going to
sorry.
have cases in which.
Sorry, let me just finish making the point, okay?
Gotcha.
So
Sorry.
so yeah, no worries. Yeah, so a small share of the starting laws will produce anything interesting. Then the idea is that when you have so there are 2 ways you can get a multiverse. The first one is you say the universes just exist for no reason. Now, I think that's a bad theory because it's not simple. If the universes just exist for no reason, then it's like, then you're positing a bunch of different fundamental stuff, which makes your theory not at all parsimonious. The better theory is to say, okay, look, the reason why there's all this stuff is that there's this simple physical law that gives rise to a bunch of universes. So there's this, more basic, maybe like, whatever the, strings vibrating, blah, 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 they get a bunch of universes. But the problem is that just kicks fine tuning back a level, right? That just kicks it up to the level of being about explaining why there's this more fundamental thing at the higher level that explains the phenomenon, right? So why do you have this starting law that's such as to produce a complicated universe, and the odds of that starting law being that way are very low? So yeah, so that's the first worry, I guess. What do you make of that? The idea is that it just pushes up the fine tuning up a level to what the starting law is from which all the universes are generated.
I don't really understand. Like, I still feel the argument stands that if there's an infinite amount of universes,
Random person, I can't hear you. Are you speaking?
Yeah, okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Can other people hear random person?
Yeah, I can hear him fine.
Oh, what? Huh, that's weird.
Um,
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, yeah. I don't know. That was weird.
Okay, so I still sort of don't understand. So obviously, I believe in the second reason for why multiverses exist. I don't believe that universes just exist for the sake of existing or just happen to exist. I still don't understand why this kicks back, or what it means to kick back fine-tuning a level to a thing that I don't understand the argument. I still think that if there's an infinite amount of universes, there's going to be those specific ones which have a very low probability of producing something interesting occur.
Yeah. Well, so the idea is that if you have so there are some physical laws that will result in a bunch of universes. But the idea is that those laws are themselves finely tuned. It is very unlikely that you'd have a law that produces a universe, right? So so imagine you have a law that produces a bunch of universes. Here's a much simpler law. There's just stuff that sits there doing nothing. Much simpler. You don't even need a law for that, right? That's the default. Okay. Or here's another simpler law. Maybe not the stuff. The stuff doesn't just sit there doing nothing, but the stuff just moves in a circle, all the fundamental things. Or, they just move in a line until they hit each other and bounce off in a random direction. All those are way simpler than whatever the basic multiverse laws are. And there are like an infinite number of these. And so whatever theory you have, that's the multiverse theory, that theory is going to have a very low probability, because the odds of getting that law that produces a bunch of universes, it's very low. It's much more probable that you get a law that produces nothing interesting. And this, just imagine writing a random computer program to have stuff move around. You wouldn't expect it to naturally generate a multiverse. And in order to get something that does that, you'd need fine tuning. And so I think that just kicks it up a level. So that's the first problem with the multiverse.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, I haven't thought about what causes the multiverse to exist, but if I were to refute what you were saying, I would assume that the fine-tuning at the level of why multiple universes exist is not as improbable as the one that produces something interesting within a universe. I don't know how true that is. I haven't looked into it, so I could be totally off base.
Yeah, right. So I think that it's just the most persuasive kind of fine-tuning is just this basic conceptual point that the odds of getting a physical system that produces anything interesting are very low. And I think, I think that just also applies to a multiverse. That's the first problem. Wait, sorry. I'm actually going to send the live stream link to some other people or to on Substack. So wait, yeah, give me 1 second. I've learned that multitasking, I generally get distracted.
Gotcha.
Here's a thought about the multiverse, right? So you could have a view that says, well, we have these laws that will create multiple universes. But I think all the atheist person is really trying to do is just say, well, we have all these universes and they're very different and there's an infinite number of them. And maybe the underlying principle is just that every possible universe is actual. Maybe it's like this David Lewis modal realism. And that, there's some simplicity to that, and just in the sense that okay, for any x, if x is logically possible, then x is actual, x being a world. So you could just have that instead of having to posit another ad hoc level of, this universe generating machine. So what do we and if you did have every possible universe, every logically possible universe, that would include Beth 2 possible people, or maybe not Beth 2, but certainly
No,
a
no, I
lot
mean,
of people.
Lewis's view does get good, get Beth to people.
Yeah, and it would definitely be enough to meet normal fine-tuning arguments.
Yeah. So I mean, the problem with that is, you get this, you have this worry where, so I think just a view like modal realism, I agree it gets around this problem directly, but it undermines induction, because for every world where induction keeps working fine, there are a bunch of worlds where induction breaks down in increasingly dramatic ways. And so it makes the probability of induction continuing to work either 0 or undefined, depending on complicated things. And so, and I don't think you should have a view on which, like you should think you should think the sun will rise tomorrow, not the sun will maybe rise tomorrow. Or I mean, you can think, maybe it's possible that it doesn't, but you should think it probably will rise tomorrow. And I think this is incompatible with that. So, yeah.
Did Lewis ever write a response to that, or was it not an argument?
Yeah, Lewis did,
during his
but I
time?
found his response very unconvincing. I mean, what he says is that he argues that there's a parallel between this argument and he just says this is just the problem of induction. But I don't think it's a problem of induction, because the problem of induction, you can get around it by saying that the worlds that have more people that the simpler worlds are more likely to be actual if simplicity is a virtue. But you can't get around this one by saying the simpler worlds are more likely to be actual, because all the worlds are actual. Well, I mean, actually,
right.
he thinks actual is indexical, but because all the worlds concretely exist, right? So I think the correct solution to the problem of induction doesn't work for his view, and that if you adopt a kind of indifference principle across the people you might be, then his view is just completely untenable. Where Lewis wants to say that would also apply to possible people. But I know I'm not a possible person, so I shouldn't apply an indifference principle to that. I don't, yeah. And then I think Lewis's view has other kind of big problems. I don't think it provides a good account of modality, because, as you were suggesting, you're like, there's something simple about it where you say all the possible worlds exist. But remember, Lewis wants to explain modality. So what he wants to say is, look, the reason why it's possible for there to be an elephant in my room is that there's a possible world where an elephant's in my room. So you can't use the modal facts to explain what worlds concretely exist if you're using the facts about what worlds concretely exist to explain the modal facts. So I think then it doesn't give you a good reduction of modality. Now you can just adopt the view without trying to reduce modality, just saying, it's the simple theory where you say, there are these fundamental modal facts and then they exist without limit. I also think, I don't know, it has certain other problems. It makes it very unlikely that I would I don't know. I won't go too much into detail. I mean, because I think the induction problem is really the fatal one. But yeah, it does.
I just convinced myself of it. Atheists need to start adopting this view. It's way better than the current multiverse view. Because you should just say that we don't know the answer to the problem of induction, which is what everyone already says.
I don't. I think we do know.
You don't say that, but I think most people do.
Is that? I mean, I don't know. I think there are a lot of decent solutions to the problem of induction, but I think it's not so much that that there might be some solution. It's that we can just know that there isn't a solution, right? Because if we say, of the people with your exact evidence, of the people who have your exact mental states, you should apply an equal credence across the actual ones that you might be. Like, suppose that there's one simulation of me on Earth and one simulation of me on Mars with my exact experiences. I should assign an equal probability to being the one on Earth and Mars. If that's true, then I should think it's overwhelmingly more likely that I will be in a non-inductive world. And so then I shouldn't trust induction. And, there are other problems where it's like, for this reason, also, it's not good with your current evidence, because induction would probably have failed in the past, right? So it's very unlikely that you would get to this state where you have your current evidence. And then it also doesn't predict psychophysical harmony, because for every, bunch of other problems. And I think it's sort of worse for psychophysical harmony, because the vast majority of minds will be these sort of like disembodied masses of mental goo, where they're just having these like random chaotic fluctuations of experience. But anyways.
Why doesn't God also kick up fine tuning? Like, how do we know God isn't fine tuned or fine tuned? Like the argument cutting both ways.
So God doesn't kick it up to God, because the idea is, so there's fine tuning if there's a wide range of manipulable parameters and there's nothing special about the parameter. Okay, right. So if there are, suppose there are 100 million different values that something could take on, and it takes on one specific value where there's something especially valuable about that. Well, then it's like, that's very coincidental. But God doesn't have any finely tuned parameters. And so it doesn't push the problem back to God, because it's like God, it's not like God has 5 different parts that all have to be narrowly balanced. God is just a being of unlimited goodness. So God is both very simple, so has a high prior probability, and lacks arbitrary limits, making him have a higher prior probability, and then doesn't need fine tuning.
Wait, why is a God simple?
Why is what?
Why is God simple?
Because God has just one property without limits, namely goodness. And if you just take a fundamental property and have it exist without limits, then that's a simple hypothesis.
Well, if it doesn't have any limits, doesn't that mean that it can manipulate any parameter an infinite amount? Doesn't that also require a bunch of different parameters for God to be capable of doing something like that?
For God to be unlimited? No, I don't think so. I mean, so I think, okay, so when we're thinking about simplicity, I think what you want to look at is if you were trying to give a precise description of the entity, where you could invoke only fundamental entities or something, where maybe the mathematical facts are fundamental entities, so a simple mathematical description is better, then how simply could you describe it? Well, it's very easy to describe a God. You just say exists one thing of unlimited goodness, right? Where you say, take this fundamental thing, goodness, and then have it exist without limit. And that's very simple.
Okay, so I didn't read the article, but what exactly do you believe about a God? Is it prescriptive? Does a specific God exist, or is it just something?
I think that there's a perfect being who created the universe. Beyond that, I don't know. I sort of lean towards, I think probably none of the major religions are right. Of the major religions, if I had to rank them in plausibility, Christianity and Hinduism are the two best.
Okay. And then why are those the two best?
I mean, we could go into this, but this might be slightly outside what I want to talk about. But I mean, I can just describe briefly. I think Christianity is better because there's some impressive modern Christian miracle claims, like Our Lady of Zaytun and the levitation of Joseph of Cupertino. By the way, are you a debater by any chance? You sort of talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In high school or college or?
High school, just graduated.
Oh, nice. Congrats. So I think Christianity is better because there's okay historical evidence for the resurrection. I don't think it's that convincing, but the naturalists at least have to think something kind of weird happened. And then Hinduism is more plausible just because they get a weirdly large amount right. I think reincarnation is plausible for the kind of anthropic reason I described, where if you reincarnate a bunch of times, then the odds that you'd be having these experiences now are higher because you repeat the experiences. Well, if you only have the experience once, what are the odds you'd be having them now? So that's one thing that Hinduism weirdly gets right, which is a very specific prediction. Then it also that meditation is valuable, that we should treat animals well, and so on. And so it's these are the sort of teachings that you might expect out of that true religion. But I don't know. I think Christianity ends up winning by a bit. But overall, I think probably the major religions, are false.
Okay. What do you mean by infinite goodness? Why can't a God be infinitely bad and also make the universe?
Yeah. So the evil God thing. So I think an evil God is an interesting hypothesis. Oh, Amos is here. Hey, Amos, how are you?
Partner, doing well.
Shouldn't you be sleeping? Isn't it fucking 4 in the morning in your God?
Oh no, it's not 4 in the morning. I'm staying up because I have a deadline to submit an abstract to a conference, and the deadline is end of the day US time, and I didn't do it today, so but I'm taking a break.
I see. Yeah. Well, we found a debater who's willing to debate about things, and most of the debaters.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to come in and ask who designed the designer.
Oh, I've been destroyed.
It was a different designer. There's an easy answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So why not believe the evil God challenge? Well, And why not think there's an evil God? I mean, I think there are a bunch of reasons. If you're curious, I have an article about the evil God. I mean, the first one is I think there are plausible different formulations of theism. One of them that I find more plausible is you just say God is what you get when you have an unlimited mind, and then if you do that, then the mind would be powerful, all powerful and all good, because those are both the limits on a mind. Or sorry, he would be all powerful and all knowing, and then he was all knowing. He would understand the moral reasons to do the right thing. And so if you adopt a thesis that I do adopt, which I can talk about if you're curious, according to which a perfectly rational person would do the right thing, then you get the result that an unlimited mind is more likely. I also think that by the way, I'll kick out Prophet Rob. Because I need to kick someone out to add a new person to the stage. So the idea is that if you have a designer, it's sort of like simpler to say there's an unlimited mind rather than, and I actually think I sort of go back and forth, but in some moments I think the unlimited mind formulation of theism is better than the unlimited value formulation. I also think so God's supposed to be like, goodness is just one, like there are different kinds of value, right? There's aesthetic values, there's epistemic value. And so what you want is a God who has unlimited value of all kinds, right? Because that's much simpler. But if you have a God who has unlimited value of all kinds, rather than just an arbitrary subset of values, then you get a God who only cares about a limited, then like you can't have a maximally disvaluable God, because if they were unlimited in their value with respect to like the epistemic facts, like if they were perfectly wise, then they would realize they have to act morally, right? So for that reason, the evil God would have to like have arbitrary limits on their rationality and so on, which makes it less simple. The other point is it's a very, the evil God is a skeptical scenario. If there's an evil God, then you shouldn't trust your faculties. Like you shouldn't trust your reason if there's an evil God manipulating your reason. But if you shouldn't trust your reason, then you shouldn't trust your reason that led you to believe in an evil God in the first place. And so for that reason, like believing in an evil God is self-defeating, where if you believe in it, then that undermines your basis for believing in it. There's a bit more to be said, but I give like 10 or 12 different things that I think hurt its probability a bit, but I don't know. Amos, do you have anything to say about the evil God challenge?
Yeah, I mean, like not much in addition to what you said. I think, so like I do think that the problem of good is worse for the evil God than the problem of evil is for the good God. For the reason that like I think on the evil God hypothesis, you're going to get a stronger prediction that God would just create every possible person and subject them to endless pain. I mean, it just seems worse than like the Theodicy, the counter Theodicies that Stephen Law comes up with. And I don't know. So I accept kind of a weird thesis called the desire as belief thesis, where I think that the desires are like a type of belief, a belief about a normative reason. And so, like, to get the evil God hypothesis, you basically need God to be like omniscient, but have his desires inverted against the good. But if you accept the thesis that I have, which is like that desires are a certain type of belief about normative reason, then it will turn out that he has false beliefs about normative reason if he has desires to do evil. And so he's not going to be omniscient, and then the hypothesis will be less simple. But that's a more controversial way of getting around the challenge.
Yeah, I think that thesis is false. But,
Okay, wait. So do you agree that God can like invent morality and shape what we think?
Nope.
No, yes. He can shape what he thinks.
Yeah. He can shape what you think, but he can't shape morality.
Why can't a God shape morality if it can do infinite things?
Because he can do
so
anything.
The moral truths are necessary.
Wow, we're just saying like the same thing concurrently.
Yeah, we're just saying the same. Yeah, like me and Matthew had the same views about basically everything apart from the desire as belief thesis, apparently. But
and I'm a utilitarian, and Amos has some like crazy moral view.
Deontology.
But,
Yeah.
Okay. Wait. Sorry. What did you say to answer the question?
Oh, so like we consider omnipotence to be the ability to do whatever's logically possible, or maybe the ability to do whatever's metaphysically possible if those come apart. And like we don't think it's possible for the moral facts to alter. We think they're necessary.
Right. So like for example, you know,
Wait, hold
God
on.
can't.
Why do you think making a
God-
universe, making like matter out of non-matter is possible? Like metaphysically possible or like epistemically possible?
I mean, it's certainly epistemically possible, right? Like, why wouldn't it be epistemically possible?
Well, physics, like matter cannot be created out of nothing.
It doesn't say that. So like the law only says that like you know, matter can't be like created or destroyed within a closed physical system, right? So it doesn't say that it's like impossible for
Also,
humans
God
to be
obviously
created
God
if
like
the system is
like
closed.
like the creation of the universe and the physical laws is obviously not constrained by the physical laws.
Okay. I mean, okay. Why do you think like creating a universe is metaphysically possible?
So like seems possible, and I think there are good arguments that it actually happened. Meaning, so like the best inference to something being metaphysically possible is if you have a good argument that it actually happened. And so like if you think that the arguments for theism are persuasive, then that's a reason to think that the world actually was created.
Yeah, I mean, it seems very weird to think that there would be like a god of unlimited power who would just like try but be unable to make a universe from nothing.
Well, do you think there's an infinite past? So do you think there was like a creation at a certain point, or do you think that like there's a creation sort of dependent-ish relationship, but you can actually have past events going back forever?
I don't think there's an infinite past.
I think there's an infinite. Why don't you think there's an infinite past?
Oh, Amos is right about something. Let's go.
Because I think causal finitism is correct.
Wait, but like, don't you accept the? So, like, do you not think that the anthropic arguments for reincarnation entail that the past is infinite as well as that the future is infinite?
No.
Wait, why not?
Well, whether the past is infinite or the future is infinite, they both predict Aleph null people.
Yeah, but like, like, won't it be like probability zero that like you're on like the bottom end of the infinite set?
No, because every number is on the bottom end of the infinite set.
Is it? Wait, yeah, maybe
like
this is right.
if you
I don't know. Wait,
like every particular number is zero is the first 0% of numbers, right?
Are you both,
yeah, but like
it's
not the first one. Yeah, are we first what?
Are you both presentists? I can't remember.
I don't have a
About
view.
time.
Matthew, for some reason, has a confident view about time. I don't.
I don't have a confident view, okay? I have weak leanings in favor of B theory. I guess maybe if B theory is true, then an infinite past is possible. I don't know. I think if A theory is true, I have the very strong intuition that you can't have an infinite past. It seems obviously impossible. But if the B theory is true, then I don't think there's anything special. So yeah, maybe there could be an infinite past. I don't know. Hard to know. And all this stuff with infinities gets very weird.
Okay, wait, so why is...
Wait, can I just, before we move on, I just want to comment. I just want to boast that I was able to have the soul read on you being a debater, just from the way you talk.
Yeah, that's kind of...
Like, you know, debaters, you know, they all talk the same way, where it's like, it's hard to describe the way they talk, but yeah, I don't know. Are you like, did you do policy? I assume you did.
Yeah,
you did policy. And are you like, I don't know, are you going to debate in college?
Probably not, no.
Yeah. I mean, if you are, and not good to associate with villains like me. But yeah, did you follow my drama with the debate community?
Not like loosely, like I heard of it. I don't know. Like,
oh
what
yeah,
exactly
yeah, it was pretty funny. Yeah. Okay. Anyways,
so,
back to God, rather than crazy debaters.
So why does a God need like infinite goodness if like creating a universe is metaphysically possible? Like, why do we know that like it would need to be maximized if there are a lot of other gods who are like who have finite goodness but could create a universe?
Yeah. So the idea is that a few reasons. The first one is that an unlimitedly good God is simpler because you just posit one property without limits. And so it's simpler. It doesn't have arbitrary limits, so it has a higher prior probability. Just like, I mean, imagine we're considering two theories. One theory is that there are completely uniform laws throughout the universe. And the other theory is that there are laws that are uniform throughout the universe, except there's one patch that's 1 foot by 1 foot where the laws are totally different. Okay. The second theory is like way worse, right? Even though there are an infinite number of ways you could do it, because everyone is an arbitrary limit that lowers the probability. Okay, so the idea is that you get some more lowerings of the probability. Second, I think there are other good arguments for the existence of God that point towards an unlimited God. So, for example, I think the argument from motion shows that God is pure act. So that was a joke. That was like the argument from motion, a joke. Yeah, so for that reason, no, I mean, but so there are some other arguments. Like the two best arguments for the existence of God or two of the best are psychophysical harmony and the anthropic argument, and both of them point to an unlimited God. The anthropic argument points towards a God who creates every possible person, but then it has to be very, very powerful, where like only a very select range of the weak gods would make every possible person. And then the idea is that with an unlimited mind, you get an explanation of psychophysical harmony, which is the harmonious pairing between the mental and the physical. Because if there is an unlimited mind, then necessarily it would be unlimited in the efficacy of its will, and so as a result, it would be able to do whatever it wants. But if you have a mind that's limited in some way, then you would have if you have a mind that's limited in some way, then the question is why there's the specific range of causal laws that connect the mental states to what happens, and then you need fine tuning in order to get the laws to pair up with the physical in a harmonious way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one other way you can tell that people are debaters. They say "okay" like that after you like say a thing. They'll be like "okay," and then they'll pause, and then they'll be like "insofar as." Blah, blah, blah. And I did it too. I'm now sufficiently far out of debate that I once again, don't talk. Maybe I talk like a debater to some degree, but I think I talk like a debater less than I used to. But to be clear, I'm not like insulting you. It's not like a bad way to talk.
Yeah.
It's just amusing.
Yeah. I also find it kind of funny. But so, isn't there also some fine tuning that required for an infinitely good God, given that there's like suffering in this world?
Well, I don't know why that's fine tuning. I agree that the problem of why there's so much seemingly gratuitous suffering, but that's a real problem if you believe in God. Like it is very puzzling. Like why, if there's a perfect God, why, to use the technical term, so much shit's fucked. But I don't think it's an insurmountable problem. So I think, there are all these theodicies that people have given, some of which are kind of plausible. I have my own theodicy that I think is pretty plausible, according to which God wants to be in some broad sense apart from the world. And then, because maybe that would strengthen our eventual relationship with God, just like a person not spending their first many years with their eventual spouse might strengthen their relationship with their eventual spouse. And so if you find a theodicy like that plausible, then you have this kind of nice picture of why there's evil. And even if you don't find that plausible, because I think there are so many converging lines of evidence pointing to the existence of God, then if you're just like, if you're like, maybe there's some theodicy that works, then because there's so much evidence for God, that you should think that that's a better picture of reality. But I agree, evil is a real challenge. It makes, like if there was no evil in the world, you should be really confident that God exists. And given that there is, you should be like much less certain.
Wait, okay, so this also does seem to add up like logical principles that we can't exactly explain, right? So this is the same problem that like a half omnipotent God has, is it not? Like that there are certain logical principles that we'd have to find to explain the existence of this.
I don't understand what you're saying.
So you said that like a half omnipotent God, or like a God that's like not infinitely good, has a lower chance of existing because it's more complicated and we have to find more logical principles to explain why that God didn't have infinite power, right?
I don't know what you mean when you say we have to find more logical principles. Like the reason is just that it's a more complicated thing to exist, right? So what you want is, in terms of the fundamental thing, whatever you think is most fundamental that gives rise to the other stuff, you want that, at least the concrete stuff, you want that stuff to be simple. And so positing that there's a perfect God is very simple, while positing that there's a God with this arbitrary limit with just like, only a bit of power, that's much less simple. And and it has this very arbitrary limit. Just like
I think
the laws of physics diverge in some random patch.
But okay, our God also has the arbitrary limit of not eliminating all suffering and like creating infinite pleasure, does it not?
That's not an arbitrary limit. Like what we mean by an arbitrary limit is just in terms of the fundamental thing that you're positing, there's some restriction on what it does, right? Or there's some limit on its properties. So maybe it would only have the power to do A, B, and C rather than out of the whole. Like it would be weird if it could just do like 5 random things. In contrast, if you have a perfect God, then if you have a perfect God, then there's no limit because it just has one essential property, which is being perfect or being an unlimited mind or something. And so there aren't any limits. Now there is. So I think like the limits have to do with what you're fundamentally positing. There is this worry about its explanatory power, right? So there is this worry about how well the theory explains the world. Yeah, I agree that simpler theories explain the world, explain the world better. I agree that a limited God explains why there's evil better, rather. But I think that a perfect God is independent. It's much more plausible in terms of prior probability. It best explains 2 otherwise extremely puzzling facts about the world, such that it beats a limited God. And I actually think it beats a limited God by a lot. Like just think about how unlikely how much it takes a hit to the prior probability to posit this extra arbitrary limit. It's a really big hit to the probability, right? And the reason it's a really big hit to the probability, it's for the same reason, just think about what's your credence in there being a God who knows everything except one fact? 0, right? That would be like a completely bizarre and arbitrary random limit. That nukes the probability of a theory. And so for that reason, you should think it's very unlikely that that there's a perfect see, what sometimes happens is I'll sort of get distracted midway through a sentence, and then I'll say the opposite of what I mean. I'll just sort of autofill the sentence. Okay, in my defense, I have to be screening the call for various other people. So I am multitasking. Right. So back to what I was saying. Anyone want to leave? Because I do need to kick someone out.
I can go.
No, Amos, but you're adding so much to the conversation.
Okay.
I can go, but I would want to be back later because I still have a few questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, who is it?
I'll go in a bit.
Random person, you can kick me out.
Okay. All right. Bye, random person. Good speaking. Yeah. Okay. So, So for that reason, the near theistic alternatives are way worse than theism, where you say that there's a God that's limited because it just adds adding one a God who didn't know one fact is extremely unlikely. And then the idea is that if a God didn't know most of the a God that has even more limits on its power, that's even less likely than the God that's missing one fact. And so a limited God is super unlikely because it requires this extraordinary degree of fine tuning.
Okay. So, I mean, okay. I just don't understand why causing God doesn't also require fine tuning.
Well, I don't think anything caused God. I think God exists sui generis and necessary.
It just okay.
I don't think anything caused God.
Matthew, I'm going to be very sui generis with my rebuttal. That was dumb. Okay, that was incredibly dumb.
Wait, what? He was talking about the probability of things causing God. Why?
No, I'm talking to you. Yeah.
What?
I'm talking
Alright.
to you.
Okay, but anyways, so yeah, if the idea is just why God isn't complicated, well, okay, here's another way of thinking about it. Have you heard of modal realism?
No.
So the idea of modal realism is every possible world concretely exists. So imagine a world that's filled just with like tigers on a
Yeah,
giant
sure.
pancake, like that world actually exists. Okay. Modal realism, it's a kind of weird view, but there is something more kind of plausible about it, where it's like it's kind of simple. You just posit the modal things exist without limit. It would be much worse if you posited that just like a random 57 of the possible worlds existed, right? Because you're positing this completely arbitrary limit. And so in a similar way, positing that there's unlimited goodness or an unlimited mind is much better than positing there's this kind of arbitrarily limited mind.
Okay, but why do we know that like the causes are simpler? Or I guess you just think that like God has no cause, right?
Yeah. I am God is the cause of all thing. He begets, yet is unbegotten. He causes, yet is uncaused.
Is that the Quran?
I think that's it's either the Quran or a Muhammad hijab quote. We say he is the soul. Yeah, he's the soul begetter who is not begotten. How does one beget all if they're begotten? Contradiction. Contradictory sets of propositions.
After the intellectual decimation has been done, you've been intellectually decapitated, disheveled, you've been demolished, you've been disappointed, you've been intellectually decapitated.
You've been discombobulated. I think that was one of them. Yeah, that was a great Muhammad hijab clip. Muhammad hijab is such a meme. He's so funny, Like there was this funny clip of him, and Amos tipped me off to the existence of this one. There's a clip of Muhammad hijab on Piers Morgan, where Piers Morgan says, saying something and not stuttering, by the way. And hijab says, "Why are you stuttering?" Morgan says, "I'm not stuttering." He says, "You are stuttering." Just doubles down. It's just an incredible clip.
It was because like Piers Morgan stuttered about 3 minutes before that happened, and Muhammad hijab clearly had stored in his head that he was going to call out Piers Morgan for stuttering, but then Piers interrupted him and went on a different tangent, so he was like, I'm going to deploy that later. But he just hadn't stuttered for a number of minutes.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen there was a great debate on like Islamic YouTube, and it was like the Clash of the Titans, because you had this one guy, his name is like Jake the Muslim metaphysician, and he's from the school that like they're very literalist about the Quran, but not really. Like, so in the Quran you have these verses about the two right hands of God, but he doesn't say that God is physical, because that's also something that is like a no to say, because that's too anthropomorphic.
They're metaphysical right hands.
Yeah, so he has to say, he has to say like, well, I affirm that Allah has two right hands, but also, and I affirm it according to the natural meaning, which is like the catchphrase you're meant to use, but also it has no likeness to reality. So he is basically saying nothing. But this is the position he defends in this debate. And his debate opponent is like this sort of liberal Harvard professor who's a Neoplatonist. And so he thinks that you can't predicate anything of God. And so whenever in the Quran it says like God is doing this is like a lesser emanation that is being referred to. So it's like the two most extreme crazy positions on either end, and they have this full like 3-hour debate. It's pretty great.
Yeah, one guy, I like watching the debates between Joshua Sidiwade and Muhammad hijab or Ali Dawa, where like Muhammad hijab, where like Joshua Sidiwade is like just completely jacked and this like really impressive guy, and he'll and like I feel like half of what makes hijab good, like hijab, he sort of has this nice ethos where he sort of he's like he's the lion of Islam, and he like he'll he's really energetic, and it was just fun watching him just run into the brick wall of Joshua Sidiwade and kind of fall apart. And Ali Dawa, it was especially funny where Ali Dawa was like, yeah, well, you see, I think the Trinity, yeah, it's an incoherent doctrine.
This is like Norman Finkelstein.
That actually is what he sounds like. It's kind of weird.
Is it really? I've never heard him. Is he the one who had his wife writing on the whiteboard? I think that's the only thing I know about him. But that was a pretty great clip.
Oh, I don't know about that clip. But yeah, there's a funny clip that of Alidawa talking about how proud he is of the fact that in his ideal society, apostates would be executed. And it's of a clip of him saying, "We're proud of that," but like in a really high pitched voice, so it's been clipped and sort of memed to death. Eric Zhu, do you have any other questions, or is it Zhu or Zhu, or how's it pronounced?
Zhu.
Zhu.
Okay, so you agree everything in the universe has a cause, right? Other than like God.
Depends what you mean by thing.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I mean, I think I'll like tentatively agree with that. Like everything, I mean, like it also, I guess, depends lately on what you mean by in the universe. Where like I don't think math and logic have a cause, but they're not really like they're not in the universe, but they're sort of applicable to the universe. So yeah, it depends on exactly what you mean by that. But I sort of broadly agree with the spirit.
I mean,
I'd say I'm 97% on board.
Okay, so the argument I was going to say is that isn't it an arbitrary condition to impose that like God is the only thing in the universe that doesn't have to follow like causality, like it's the only thing that isn't caused.
That is it an arbitrary limit that why would it be an arbitrary limit for God to be uncaused?
Because everything else is caused. Every other entity in the universe.
So is the thought like so it's an arbitrary exception because this one rule applies to God that applies to nothing else. Yeah. So like I think there'd be two things, right? So one like Matthew and me both think that there are things other than God that don't have causes, and so maybe we agree that God is like the only concrete object that doesn't have a cause, but like he's not the only thing that doesn't have a cause, because we think that moral values, moral reasons, numbers, sets, things like that, they don't have causes, but but like other than that, I think the arbitrary exception point is different from the arbitrary limits point. So like the arbitrary limit stuff that Matthew was talking about is about how you like specify the properties of the being and whether the properties themselves admit of exceptions. So like whether the property of God's having knowledge admits of certain exceptions about things that God doesn't know. But like God being an exception from other things about reality isn't an arbitrary limit, because it's not an exception within a property that's being applied to God. Like God is going to be like an exception to other things in reality, and that only he is the most powerful mind. Okay, but that's not an arbitrary limit. That's just an exception.
Right. Like God's going to be the only being who begets but is not begotten, but that's not an arbitrary except like whatever the first thing is, it'll necessarily beget but not be begotten.
Okay. So the other thing is that I still don't really understand the reason for why like God can't invent morality. So like, do you agree that everyone's like thoughts and like consciousness is based off of like physical things? Like if you modified the brain enough, you could get someone to believe anything.
So I agree. It's yes, but we have to be careful on that, right? So I think that what is like given the laws of nature are as they are, what causes all of them is conscious or is certain physical things. But I don't think that physical things are all you need for a consciousness. I think that I'm a dualist, right? So I think there's a soul, and I think there are laws that govern the relationship between the soul and the physical.
Okay, so can God create souls or like change change stuff about souls?
Yeah, I think he did create soul.
Okay, so I just don't understand why, like, if we think a God is possible, why it wouldn't be like any other God that just decided to invent laws of nature or like morality.
I don't think
yeah.
Like,
sorry, I was just going to ask, like, are you assuming that morality is like a purely sociological or linguistic phenomenon, such that God could manipulate that and thereby manipulate morality?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So like me and Matthew just disagree with that. So
yeah. Yeah, like on my conception of morality, and Amos's as well, like morality is sort of like math or logic, where like could God make it so that you could have a married bachelor? No, a married bachelor is necessarily impossible. That's not the type of thing that has a source. So
What do you mean? How's the source?
like there's nothing else that makes the mathematical or logical laws what they are. They just exist necessarily.
Okay.
Like I don't think there's anyone who created numbers or who created the fact that you can't have a married bachelor. Those are just necessary facts that were true even before the universe, or even sans the universe or whatever.
Okay. And then, so you don't think the laws of physics are like necessary facts? They're only something that apply to this universe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, this is like the standard view among like most philosophers. Well, I mean, so most philosophers are moral realists. There are different moral realist views, but like nearly everyone agrees the laws of nature are contingent. While there's a much greater share of philosophers think that the mathematical and moral and modal laws are non-contingent.
Okay. And then do you think like there's like one correct morality?
Yeah.
And the like God is like
it's
the
moderate
embodiment or whatever?
deontology.
Sorry, what was the follow-up question about the one correct morality?
So you think that there's one like true correct morality, like system of morals, and that like God embodies it, right?
Yeah, right. Like God is the thing, right? So there are true facts about what things are good, and then God is the most good kind of thing.
Okay. I mean, It still seems like a contradiction with like the fact that God is maximally good. Like it seems like the two are irreconcilable, like they're opposites of each other. The fact that there's suffering that exists.
And
Just
what's
like
supposed
an
to be the
antithetical.
contradiction between there being suffering and there being a perfect God? Like, I agree it's surprising, but I don't think there's any like straightforward contradiction.
Well, so you agree that the God is moral and that it prioritizes doing moral things, right?
Yeah.
And then you also agree that it can change anything about the physical world to maximize pleasure or morality.
Well, I don't think pleasure and morality are the same, but good.
Yeah. Okay. So if that were true, then necessarily it would have to create a universe of like infinite, like moral pleasure or like goodness. And
yeah, I agree. A perfect
being
not... would make a universe of infinite goodness. I agree with that.
Okay. And then do you agree that this universe is not infinitely good?
No, I think this universe is infinitely good. If you take, well, it depends on exactly what you mean by this universe. I think if what you mean is by this is you're asking that is all of the reality that God created, is that together infinitely good? Yes. Because I think, well, among other things, there will be an infinitely long, infinitely good afterlife.
Well, yeah, but there are still other things that are bad in the universe, right? Like even if there's an infinitely good, infinitely long afterlife, there's other things that are finitely bad, and it's like weird that why God would not like get rid of that also.
I agree it's weird. Like I agree. Evil is surprising if there's a God, but you were suggesting that there was some straightforward contradiction, and I don't think there is one.
Yeah.
Well,
so there's going to be some reason why the
It's
bad things exist that ultimately leads to some good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the, like one
Right.
common explanation for a lot of it is like, maybe some part of the reason why, humans do so much bad stuff is because we have free will. And it's valuable for us to have free will. It strengthens our relationship with other people. It's good that we're not these sort of mindless robotic automatons.
And like that's not plausible, but it's not logically impossible. And so all you need to diffuse a logical argument from evil is just the mere logical possibility that something like free will is valuable enough that it permits God to allow various evils.
Okay. So, I mean, this also like it seems really implausible. Like, there's also you know, just one Earth? Like, why wouldn't there be like 90 billion trillion Earths just like everywhere?
There are way more than that.
Yeah.
There's at least Beth 2 Earths.
Yeah. How do I
Okay.
mean, look, like the universe? I mean, so we don't know exactly how big the universe is, right? There's sort of scientific disagreement about that, but at least the evidence from physics is at least suggestive, where, and I'm not a physicist, okay, but here's my understanding. Like, if the universe is flat, then it has to be infinite in size. While if the universe is curved, then it doesn't. And what we've observed is basically that the universe is we don't know if it's flat, but we've measured, like, is it curved this much? No. Is it curved this much? No. So it has to be curved to a really small and surprising degree for it not to be infinite. So our evidence from physics does seem to point to the fact, at least tentatively, to the fact that the universe is infinite in size. I also think we have anthropic reason to think the universe is infinite in size. And there's a big multiverse that contains a bunch of Earths. So yeah, I think God creates every possible person and gives them the best possible life for them.
Okay.
Dead debater giveaway. Saying okay and then pausing.
Like, it's a lot of coincidences, and at that point, I don't know why, like, an evil god, like, coincidentally making something for like an infinitely bad afterlife and like making everyone in their worst possible world would also be possible. And like,
sorry, and so what are
mostly possible?
What are the many coincidences supposed to be? Like, because and to my mind, I think there's one big puzzle, which is why, if there's a perfect God, do so many bad things happen? And I agree, that's a real puzzle. But beyond that,
there's a long list of bad things, right?
Yeah, but I think you'd want the explanation of the bad things to cover most of the bad things, right? So what you'd want is some systematic mechanism, and I think I have one, that explains why there are a bunch of different bad things rather than just one of them. So here's one example of a Theodicy that my friend Dustin Crummett is a big fan of. He's also smart guy, worth reading his stuff. But so what Dustin argues is that there are like demons or simulators who made the world, and that's why it has so much bad stuff. Where and then that explains why there's bad stuff in this world as a byproduct of the free will of the demons or simulators. And so you can have a view like that. Now my preferred view is I adopt something called the hypothesis of indifference theodicy. So the idea is that God wants to put us in a world that has the properties of a typical godless world. And so why would he want that? Well, there are a bunch of reasons. Maybe there's some unknown reason. Maybe that strengthens our eventual relationship with God, just like spending some time apart from your eventual spouse might strengthen your eventual relationship with your spouse. Maybe it sort of like strengthens our relationship with other people, where sort of like if God was too active, that would sort of crowd out our relationship with other people. So it would put it onto the back burner, to use debater language. And so, it would weaken our relationship. Maybe it's uniquely good for soul building, where like the value of overcoming struggles, if we know we're sort of broadly like there's something more valuable about in the afterlife, having gone through the struggles of being in an actual godless universe, than if God was sort of looking over our shoulder and making sure we didn't get hurt too much. Just like, there's something especially maybe exciting and soul building about like free climbing, where you might actually die. Relative to the other kind. So, and I don't claim that this is like independently that plausible. I agree that you should think, okay, this is kind of unlikely, but I just think that it best explains the world. That we should think that we should think it probably that we like if there's a if there's a theory that really nicely explains lots of things about reality, even if there's one class of things that it poorly explains, we should think it's sort of unlikely that we should be willing to accept the bad explanation of that other stuff, because it so nicely explains so many other things.
So I have two questions. So the first one is, if God is truly all-knowing, why can't he? Doesn't that mean that there's no free will, because he can predict everything that every individual person will do?
No, because I don't think that God knowing you'll do X in advance you're still free to do something other than X. It's just if you were so disposed to do not X, then God's knowledge would be different.
I think Matthew's
say God-
kidding. The real answer is that it's logically impossible to foreknow what a free agent will do.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think that. Well, right. So I mean, well, but I mean, a few things. So, well, I guess, yeah, I don't think this is a good challenge to the existence of God, because worst case scenario, you can just say God is omniscient in the sense that he knows everything that can be known, but then you can't know what a free agent will do in advance. Or maybe God being omnipotent, so that he doesn't strip away our free will, he sort of like binds himself. Now, I also just don't think that there's a problem here, because I don't think that knowing what a person will do in the future robs them of their free will. What would rob you of your free will is if there was some event A that fixed what you could do, that made it so that you had to do B, right? That the reason you do A is because of B. But if the reason A happened in the past is because you will do B, then the explanatory connection goes the other way, and it doesn't rob you of your freedom.
Is this like soft facts?
Okay, but there are people with like who are physically fixed. Like you could probably engineer a human brain to only do one specific thing. Could you not? And at that point, like they would be forced to do it.
Wait, sorry, I don't. You could engineer a human brain to only do one thing. I agree. Like the claim of free will is not that we have an infinite range of things we can freely do, right? That like no matter what is happening physically, we have an infinite range of options.
Yeah, I agree. It's like
so even if there could be a scenario where you like brainwash someone or make the physical states determine certain actions, that wouldn't undercut free will in any important sense.
Okay, so it's just like people have a true ability to choose when they physically can choose.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is like with the like separation makes us appreciate God more. Like, why wouldn't God just like eliminate every possible conversation about the existence of God?
Why would he? The idea is that God doesn't want to intervene. The idea is God doesn't want to intervene in the world. So if he was going to intervene in the world, he'd do it to stop things like slavery and the Holocaust. But he wants the world to be broadly apart from him. He certainly wouldn't intervene in the world to make people not believe in him when there's, it's valuable to believe in him. Like what? Like imagine if I asked why does God not intervene in the world to like spill paint cans on young children so they get paint all over them? It's like, well, because he doesn't want to intervene, number one, and number two, that would be bad. Same thing here.
Well, hold on. So you said earlier that not believing in God is valuable. Like that God doesn't want people to believe in him initially, or like them, whatever pronoun. Initially, because separation.
What I said was that there's something valuable about God being, in some broad sense, apart from the world. Not in the sense that we don't believe in him necessarily, but in the sense that he's not actively intervening in the world. Just like, even if you believe in the existence of your spouse when you're a young kid, that wouldn't like that. It might your temporary absence might strengthen your relationship with your eventual spouse.
Why do you have a spouse when you're a young kid?
No, your eventual spouse.
Okay.
Wow. Amos fails to follow the dialectic, makes a fool of himself.
I don't think so. Let's rewind the tape. I don't think you said eventually.
Amos, you just got. Do you know what happened? You just got demolished, disappointed,
intellectually disheveled, disappointed,
intellectually decapitated.
Well, if you endorse soft facts, then you should be able to say that like a 1-year-old child has a spouse, right?
If I endorse what?
If you the soft facts view, which is what you were doing about the problem of foreknowledge, it's like William of Ockham's view.
You don't have to say they have a spouse now.
Well, yeah, but he didn't say they have a spouse now. He just said, "Oh, so and so's spouse."
Well, like so like so and so will have a spouse is different from so and so has a spouse.
Yeah, but he didn't say now. So you could still, I think you could still probably refer to.
Well,
it
if you say X is Y, you're saying X is Y now, not X will be Y at some point in the future. Yeah, you just got disheveled, generic koala,
demolished,
and disappointed,
decapitated.
Why are you stuttering? Yeah, I can't do a good Muhammad Hijab impersonation.
Why are you stuttering?
Yeah, it's a mixture of British
and
stuttering. Like Somali. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm okay at philosophy, but the thing I'm best at is doing impressions of philosophers. Like my Swinburne is
That's true.
insane. And I do a better Swinburne than Amos, I think. Amos, can you do a Swinburne impression?
Well, my brown wooden desk is a substance of a very particular sort. It has various properties, such as being brown and hard and extended in space. Okay, what's yours?
Well, suppose that there exists my brown wooden desk at some time t. Under what condition will my brown wooden desk continue at t plus 1? Well, it seems to me my brown wooden desk will continue only insofar as that there exists some sustaining cause to keep my brown wooden desk.
Roberto just said I won that one. That's devastating.
Oh,
And,
Pretty
like,
close.
I've met Richard Swinburne, so that's a big point in favor of
But,
me.
okay,
having the better
I'm
impression.
I'm
more
not
familiar with
British,
his voice.
and Amos is. So I think there should be affirmative action done in my favor.
Fair enough.
And
Okay,
dissatisfied
I
philosophy
gotta go.
says I win. Well, it seems to me that suppose that we are going to decide who wins. Well, what criteria are we going to use to decide who wins? Seems to me that we'll need some objective criteria. So if the criteria were merely flawed or subjective, that would not be sufficient. That is to say,
I had a question for you guys. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. My intuition that God wouldn't let humans suffer is about as strong as my intuition that there is such a thing as morality at all. So I was wondering if it would be kind of I wouldn't be justified in adopting the Theodicy you mentioned, Matthew, because it seems my intuition about the problem of evil is much stronger than yours, like that God wouldn't allow humans to suffer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
You're cooked, Matthew.
I think that I don't have that strong. I mean, I think, you can tell sort of a plausible story about why a person might want to. And then if there are like lots of different pieces of evidence that favor theism, then it'll favor theism overall. I guess, I don't know, like if moral anti-realism had as much explanatory power as theism, maybe I'd just take the hit on like contradicting all of our ethical intuitions. Yeah, maybe I do that. So even if you think that, then I think maybe because of theism's explanatory power, you should believe it. By the way, Roberto in the side chat, he said, and he'll be led in next when someone leaves. He said he commented on my Lydia McGrew impression, which I kill Amos at the McGrew impressions. I think Amos, do a Lydia McGrew.
I've never tried a Lydia McGrew impression. I'm not even gonna try that.
Yeah. I win this one by default. Now, it seems to me that when we harmonize the Gospels, the Gospel of John is in fact the most reliable.
That's the worst one you've ever done, actually.
Yeah, that was actually not as good. Yeah, as it normally is. It seems to me that when it comes to the Gospel of John, there are independent harmonizations between the Gospel of John and Tacitus and Lucretius and various other ancient historians that make the Gospel of John especially reliable on account of the undesigned coincidences and external validation. Yeah, Amos, why don't you do better, okay? If you're so good at
my Lydia McGrew impression, by just saying nothing is better than the Lydia McGrew impression you just did. I'm doing an impression of Lydia McGrew in her silent moments.
Yeah.
This is Lydia McGrew when she's sleeping.
That was that. I read.
So I have another question. So if fine tuning is true, then why is most of the universe like uninhabitable for life? Presumably, like God gets moral value from whatever's happening on Earth. So why wouldn't he make whatever's happening on Earth happen on other like planets? Why would he waste all that matter?
Wait, I'm gonna leave. This question is too hard for me. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, bye, Amos. Good seeing you. Okay, hey Roberto. Okay, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, well, so I think we have a prediction on theism that God would make a bunch of people, probably uncountably infinite people. I don't think we have any predictions about how he would distribute the people. Like, it's not obvious to me whether a universe where, like if he makes every possible person, it's not obvious to me whether if he, distributed the people so that they were like on every planet or only on 10% of planets, right? Because, the infinites are such that you can put them into one-to-one correspondence with every planet or every 10th planet. Doesn't seem that makes a difference.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. So the other thing I want is,
and by the way, I think you will have to count. You will have to count this as evidence for God. Like, if you're going to say that the fact that the universe, the fact that the universe isn't dense is evidence against God because you think that if there were a God, there would be a bunch more people densely packed. Then you have to think that the fact that physics suggests that the universe is really big, that is good evidence for God. Like our best estimates of the size of the universe are like, it's either infinite or like really big, way bigger than the observable universe.
Okay. Yeah. So another question I had is, I guess if we were in a simulation, do you think, like we would be able to detect that we were in a simulation, or do you think like consciousness would be the same?
I don't know if we'd be able to detect it. I mean, probably not, right? But we could get some things that maybe were suggestive of being in a simulation. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, and he was making the point that like the laws of physics seem suspiciously like what you would expect if we were in a simulation, where they're like the kinds of things that are like they're like uniquely easy to compute. Where like if you were just trying to write a computer program, you would want laws of physics more like ours. No, look, I can't follow the physics. I don't know if this is true, though. I mean, he's a smart guy. He knows some stuff.
Okay, so if we wouldn't be able to detect whether we're
by the
in a
way,
simulation,
I'm probably gonna wrap up the stream in maybe like 15 or 20 minutes because I have a desire to eat food.
Okay.
But yeah,
I think this is probably my last question then. So like, let's say God created another race of like just beings, and then they were capable of making simulations of people, right? Wouldn't that mean that like there would like, and this like one like race or like group of beings is able to make like a ton of simulations, like trillions and trillions of them, right? Wouldn't that mean that it's like more likely that like we're in a simulation that was created by like this group of beings rather than like directly created by God?
Yeah, it would. I think there are decent odds that we're simulated rather than being directly created by God.
Well, I think that the odds are like really high, right? If God exists, then we're probably like 9 trillion like groups down.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's hard to know what the odds are, right? Because it's not obvious if it's possible to simulate consciousness. Like, I don't know. Like, It just depends on the details of the psychophysical laws.
Also, how is that related to God's existence? Like you said, if God exists, then it's very likely that we're simulated.
Yeah, I by the way, I think the simulation, it would make it easier to explain to believe in God, because then it has this nice explanation of why there's evil, right? So maybe the simulators, they're in this very nice world, but they sort of mistreat us using their free will.
Yeah.
Okay, so
sorry.
I mean, yeah, that I guess that makes sense.
I think Iwan wants to jump in, but I want to say something. Yeah, before Matthew leaves, if that's fine.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. I mean, I have a question, but I can wait.
Yeah, I wonder to what degree do you think that the fine-tuning and anthropic argument actually depend on a sort of axiological proviso? I don't know if you just go.
Wait, sorry. A sort of what?
Axiological proviso, like that you can avoid. In a sense, you cannot avoid the evidential force, but you can handle them much better if you are sort of a moral error theorist or broad moral antibiotic. And you are very confident about that, to the point that even theism seems unlikely just because it includes something like moral facts.
Wait, sorry, I'm not sure if I quite got the question.
Okay,
Wait, sorry.
I think it's going to be.
Can you just say what is it that you think theism, that the fine-tuning and anthropic argument both might assume?
Yeah. Okay. Basically that. Theism gets this boost because it neatly explains that. Why are the we find the constants particularly interesting. Yeah, let's start with fine-tuning. That's gonna be easier. Lots of people just go, nihilist about that. This constant isn't actually that important because there's no such thing as value or anything like that.
Right. So I agree that the theistic explanation relies on the assumption of moral realism, but I don't think that's a problem because even if you're a moral anti-realist, you should have some credence in moral realism. So even if there's like a 1% chance of moral realism, it'll be like enough probabilistically because here's an analogy. Let's imagine that that there's a lottery and the nephew of the lottery commissioner wins the lottery twice. Well, that would be some evidence that they rigged it, even though you should have some, even if you're pretty sure that they're honest and stuff, and that they wouldn't rig it. That would still be some evidence for the rigging hypothesis because the probability of getting the things it does, the probability of hitting that are much higher if it's rigged, and so as a result, it would be evidence for the conjunction of rigging plus the lottery commissioner. So yeah, that would be my answer. I guess I want to get to O1Y's question, unless someone else has a quick follow-up, or unless you have a quick follow-up, right?
Yeah, just to say that. But surely the moral error theory is going to say the same thing, right? You should have some credence on moral nihilism. Perhaps you will deny that, and given that, it seems very weird under standard moral realism that the constant would be this way without something like positing God. That gives us some evidence that there isn't actually such a thing as value or anything like that. At least you would grant that someone can arrange the evidence in a sense that it gives, in a sense that it aids the case for moral error theory.
Well, the idea is that moral error theory, even if you're pretty sure it's right, it doesn't like moral error theory doesn't give you the ability to explain why the universe is finely tuned for life, while theism plus moral realism does. So it'll favor theism plus moral realism. And I don't think that this undermines the evidential force of the fine-tuning argument because, it's sort of like it's old news, right? That theism favors.
Sure, but
that theism requires moral realism, rather.
Yeah, but the one that is also like very take someone like Ben Watkins, say that thinks theism is bad because of reasons. Okay, but I think that given your arguments and given that he's very convinced that theism is false, he should actually update in favor of moral error theory a lot. I think, do you get what I'm saying? That you are really against the God hypothesis because independent reasons, that these sort of arguments, fine-tuning, anthropic, since they depend on this axiological proviso, they can actually be arranged in a way that they can be pretty good arguments for moral error theory.
So let me see if I'm getting this correct. Is your idea that if you think that theism, that the probability of theism conditional on moral realism, that the probability of moral realism is higher conditional on theism than if theism's false, and so then if we have good reason to think theism's false, then that would lower the probability of moral realism? Is that the idea?
No, that's not how I would put it. It's more like, for people that think the probability of theism is a lot lower, when they see at this, they shouldn't actually care that much about the philosophy of religion debate. They should care more about the metaethics debate, that, you get these huge improbabilities under standard naturalism because...
Well, the idea is that you get that huge... improbability under theism. Under fine-tuning is ridiculously improbable under any view other than theism plus moral realism. So then you just get an update in favor of theism plus moral realism. Anyways, I want to answer the question of Ewan.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, thanks for coming on. And Pranav, I guess I won't add you, or I guess I'll add you to the stage. I'll add you too, but I don't anticipate taking your questions because maybe I will, like if one of you says something interesting. But yeah, because I do want to eat food soon. But yeah, Ewan,
yeah,
what's your
sorry,
question?
sorry. I mean, I have two, but since you're new people, I guess I'll just Okay, well, maybe first, really quick, what do you make of the normalizability objection to the fine-tuning argument?
Sorry, and what is the normalizability objection again?
That you can't have a normalizable prior over all the possible values of dimensionless parameters. So you can't coherently assign probabilities to the likelihoods of whatever the constants taking on whatever values they do given theism and so on.
Yeah, well, so I guess 2 points. I mean, the first one is that I think that even if you can't assign probability, like there are some things that are like this where I think you can still see things turning out a certain way. Like you can have an intuitive sense that it's more likely on one theory than another, even if the math would get really weird. So like, here's an example. Imagine, giving back to the earlier example, imagine that the initial conditions of the universe spelled out in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Like that would favor the existence of God by a lot. Okay, I don't know exactly how much. I don't know what the probability is. I don't know if there would be infinite of both. So it's maybe undefined or something. But it's like no, obviously it would favor God because there's some important sense in which it's unlikely. Even
yeah, sure. No, I do think fine tuning is pretty strong evidence for God. I mean, sometimes people put out specific numbers like 10 to the 120 or whatever, and just okay. But and then the second point would be.
Yeah, I mean that's relevant to right. So, and then in terms of the second point, the idea would just be that you should apply if there's a big range of the values, you should imply like a finite range. You should imply an indifference principle across the range, right? So the odds that, and maybe not exactly an indifference principle, maybe you should have a bias towards low numbers, but
yeah, no. So the indifference principle is actually what generates the problems for the dimensionless parameters because you can't have you can have a finite range, but you'd have to provide some kind of sort of ad hoc reason for restricting the range. But anyway, and then the second question I had was,
I think most of the parameters in physics are the kinds of things that where they're not actually like there is a range of things that could be like there is some cap. So that would be the first point. And the second point would be in a case where there's an unlimited range. Yeah, I don't know exactly what to think. I mean, I would think that the prior of it, like you shouldn't just do a completely uniform prior. You should have a bias towards lower numbers.
Okay, so for the first point, the reason I said dimensionless was because it's normally the parameters that have physical dimensions that for which you can assign a finite range. And so the second point is that just a variant of Swinburne's point about simplicity, or I mean, is there some other rationale for favoring small numbers?
Like I don't know. It's sort of like intuitive, right? That like if we accept that you can't have a completely uniform indifference range across the infinite numbers, because then you violate normalizability. Like I don't know. If we just consider which is more likely, the strength of gravity being, the constant g being 42 or something of some unit, or it being, and then you just give, a 5 million digit number that's just a random string of digits. I think it being 42 is likelier. Like if we just consult our intuitions about prior probability, they seem to favor theories like that.
Well, okay, sure. I guess there's more to say about that, but I guess if you're pressed for time, I can just move on to the second question.
Sure.
Well, so I mean, like I said, I do think fine tuning is a pretty strong argument for theism, but just from the maths, right, from Bayes' theorem, if there are other hypotheses which are antecedently just as probable, so you assign at least as high a credence to them before you update on the fine-tuning evidence, then even after you update on the evidence, theism still won't get more than half of, you won't assign a credence of more than half to it. And so my question is, if I think there are a few other antecedently quite probable views that actually predict the fine-tuning evidence just as well. So modal realism, I guess also maybe axiarchism, Philip Goff and Tim Mulgan, I think they propose cosmic purpose or whatever. I mean, maybe you think that each of these on their own, antecedently they are kind of not quite as probable as theism, but altogether, if you think that they take up at least half of the sort of the probability space before you update on the fine-tuning evidence, then even after you update on the evidence, you still won't give theism a credence of more than half. And so I suppose
right. So I would just say I think these are all like much worse than theism, and I'd be happy to go. If I had more time, I would go through them in detail and discuss them.
Sure.
And I have done that at other places where I think modal realism undermines induction. I think axiarchism has a vanishingly low prior and weird arbitrariness, and also probably just implies theism. I think anyways, I think same thing with the Goff view that it kicks up fine. Anyways, yeah. So but yeah, I agree. Like, if you have some other theory that nicely explains fine-tuning, then you should go with that other theory. I do think that most of those will tend to kick the problem up a level because they have to have whatever the tuning force is going to be like it'll be kind of like it'll require fine-tuning. Anyways, yeah. So I guess that would be the last thing. Do you have anything quick to say in response? If not, then I think I'll wrap up the stream.
Well, I just want to say that I don't think modal realism undermines induction for the reasons that Lewis gives in plurality of worlds. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And definitely, I mean, I plan to do these more often. So yeah, definitely, come back at some other time because you seem interesting and philosophically informed. And yeah, I wish we'd had the opportunity to chat for longer. You also feel free to shoot me an email. I guess I'll put my email in the live chat.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, this looks good.
Yeah, my Discord is also Omnizoid, capital O, or no, lowercase O. Yeah. So anyone who wants to send me a Discord message may. Okay. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for coming on. People who came on, have a good one.